It's an all-new episode of View the Right Thing with Wes and Steve. On this installment, Wes and Steve discuss An American in Paris and A Single Man. And now, View the Right Thing.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of View the Right Thing.
Indiana Jaws, you meant to say.
No, View the Right Thing. He was dancing when I was doing the intro.
I could have sworn we agreed that it would be Indiana Jaws from this point forward.
Agreed nothing.
Oh!
So, this week...
Yeah, this week.
Pretty good movies.
We did.
One of which is called An American in Paris, so I feel like we should address, just real briefly, real quickly, our thoughts and feelings on the attacks in Paris.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, go to CNN.com or something and do a little learning.
If anybody doesn't know...
Engage in the world.
I highly doubt anybody that doesn't know knows how to find and listen to a podcast.
Right.
Yeah. So there's that.
But obviously, we were very saddened by the loss of lives and the attack on people and culture. Mm-hmm. And obviously, because we do a movie podcast, art is very important to us. And when we see that horrific things happen, especially in art venues, that's hard to see. So,
it's gross.
Yeah,
it's what it is.
So for anybody over there, or anybody that knows anyone, or anybody that's just negatively affected by this, we feel for you, and I think that's about all I want to really get into. There's a lot we could talk about, but I don't think that's really what our podcast is. So
sure, I agree.
So I think we'll just go on from there. Paris. All right.
Vive la France.
So Steve,
yes.
Have you seen any movies in the last week or two?
Yes. Have I seen any movies in the cinema in the last week or two? It's a different story. But
yeah, that's kind of what I mean.
Well, I did see Path of the Jedi, but that probably doesn't exactly count.
Is that the thing at Disneyland?
Yes, in the theater where they used to show Captain EO. It's now Path of the Jedi, and it's basically a trailer for the first 6 Star Wars movies. I am hearing every S out of my mouth.
I'm hearing it too, man. That's crazy.
For the first 6 Star Wars movies, and then at the very end of it is a pretty nice little reel of stuff from the 7th movie. And I have been avoiding watching the Star Wars trailers because I didn't want to see them just on my phone or on a computer screen. But seeing them in that theater with the vibro seats and on the big, huge, beautiful screen with the really great sound, I was like, this is exactly how I wanted to see a trailer for this movie.
For the first time.
I feel better. And now I've got my Star Wars buzz back. I was becoming kind of a Star Wars Scrooge.
Do you have tickets yet?
No.
Oh, man. You're behind the game, man.
No, I might just roll the dice and go alone. Like, because when the tickets went out for sale, I was like real broke that week. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to roll the dice, see what happens. I'm going to just maybe try to find a single seat somewhere on on Thursday night, or maybe just buy a really early ticket show for a Friday morning.
Yeah.
Maybe do both. Maybe buy that early Friday ticket, and then if Thursday night rolls around and I just got to go see it, then I'll just go see it,
Yeah.
Because, of course, I'm going to want to see it again right away.
I'm seeing it in New York.
Whoa.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. So,
the Coruscant of America.
The Coruscant of America.
Yeah.
So, anything else? Any real movies in the theater in the last week or two?
In the last week or two, I don't think so. Well, I had a bit of an emergency out of town trip to do.
Yep.
Didn't see any movies doing that.
You want to say hi? You want to say hi to your pop?
Well, sure. Shout out to my dad, good old Fred. He had a really big heart surgery happen. What was it? A quadruple bypass or something like that. Wow. So any of you viewsters who are familiar with that, the kind of experience that is as a relative of somebody who's going through that. But he's doing well. He's ahead of schedule on all of his recovery stuff. He's able to get up on his feet and do some walking. His breathing's getting better. They said his heart is really strong anyway. It was just that, his arteries and whatnot were We're causing him problems. And everybody out there, quit smoking cigarettes.
Yep.
For the love of tennis, quit smoking cigarettes. Please. But it was a fun little trip. Got to see relatives I haven't seen in 12 years. Hung out with my cousin Dave, who was probably the closest in age to my brother and I. What'd we do? We watched all the Star Wars deleted scenes from all 6 movies, baby.
All right.
Because that's how we bond. What else? I got a whole bunch of SAG screeners, so I've been working my way through those.
Oh, hello.
Yeah,
maybe
I don't know.
Maybe we should have some movie night that's not related to View the Right Thing.
Maybe. I've got 24 screeners right now.
I sure would.
24 of them.
I sure would like to see one.
Here's the thing. I'm sworn.
Are you not supposed to show them with people?
I don't think they mind that so
I know you
much.
can't lend them out.
Yeah, it's don't lend them out. Definitely don't let anybody copy them. Definitely don't let anybody take them and try to sell them for money. But I think if I were to responsibly bring it over, watch it, take it with me when I leave, I don't think they mind that. But I got Mr. Holmes. I got Furious 7. I got Sicario. Room.
Room.
Love and Mercy. I watched Love and Mercy, the Brian Wilson story with Paul Dano and John Cusack. That was beautiful.
Wow.
Heartbreakingly beautiful. What else? I watched The Burbs last night.
That's probably not a screener, though.
I mean, just because it's a 26-year-old movie, does that mean it's not up for these awards?
It does mean that, yes.
I think it should be. I think it should be. Shout out to Rick Dukeman. May he rest in peace.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that's about it for my movie-going adventures.
Yeah, I saw a couple of movies.
Let me hear about them.
Well, one is being done. There's a little podcast being done by our own Desiree. So she's going to talk about one, but I'll briefly.
Desiree that I saw here a moment ago.
Yeah, that's the very one. So I'll talk briefly about that movie.
Yeah.
Since her thing is coming out before this podcast.
All right.
It's called Landfill Harmonic. I saw it at AFI Fest. Let's address the AFI Fest kerfuffle a little bit.
Okay.
There were, because of you had to go out of town and you weren't available, and I had some transportation situations arise and whatnot. So we didn't actually end up seeing very many movies. We saw one movie at AFI Fest this year, which
is it over already?
It's over. It's done. It's only a week long. So so that was a little disappointing. I will say, I wasn't gaga over any of the film possibilities.
Oh, yeah?
There was one or two that I thought looked really good. One called The Lobster with...
The Lobster.
What's that guy's name? The Irish guy.
Colm Meaney?
No.
Colin Farrell?
Colin Farrell.
Oh, yes, I saw a trailer for that.
Yeah, Colin Farrell
great.
And John C. Reilly and a bunch of other people. That one looks pretty good, and I hear good things about it. I hear award buzz about that.
Cool.
And there was a bunch of galas, which are all big movies that are coming out anyways, like The Big Short, which also has a lot of Oscar buzz for it. Carol, which has Oscar buzz for it.
Carol.
It's Kate Blanchett and I think Rooney Mara.
That sounds vaguely familiar. I feel like I've seen a trailer for it.
It looks really good. Oh, Kyle Chandler's in that, and I'll watch anything with Kyle Chandler.
The coach from Friday Night Lights?
Yeah.
The dad from Super 8?
Dad from Super 8.
He's
in Bloodlines. He's in Wolf of Wall Street.
The boss from Zero Dark 30?
Yes.
Yeah, Kyle Chandler.
Yeah, Kyle Chandler. I love Kyle Chandler.
He does good work.
Yeah, he does. So, we ended up only seeing one film at the festival, and it was called Landfill Harmonic. It was a documentary.
Yeah, about the instrument kids.
Yeah, these kids that their families essentially live near a landfill, and
in what part of the world?
Now I'm blanking a little bit. Argentina, maybe.
Okay.
And so how people sort of survive there is they go through the landfill and they recycle items. And the sort of the guy who sort of instigates what happens in the film is a guy that moves out there to teach them how to recycle better and to get a better living and better lifestyle.
Wow.
Than kind of living in these. I mean, they live in some of them live in houses, some of them live in kind of huts.
Oh wow.
And so this guy goes out there to teach them that, and then sees that there's a need for education and something, an enrichment in the children's lives.
Cool.
So he he decides to start to teach them how to play music.
All right.
And he works with another man who used to be a garbage picker.
All right.
He's essentially retired now. And this guy would find objects, and I think it started with he found a broken violin, and he wanted to repair it, so he used pieces of garbage, like pieces of sheet metal or cans or various wooden pieces, and cobbled together a violin. And so they started creating instruments for these kids, and they created an orchestra, and they learned music. And
this is like Fat Albert and the Junkyard Gang,
way better
with real talent.
Yeah, it's amazing. One of the cellos was made out of like a big oil can.
Really?
And
oil can,
and it has like a, I can't remember what the piece of wood was
for the neck.
But like, the little parts that you turn to tune it.
Yeah.
Some of them was like a little Noki instrument, and one of them was the heel from a high heel shoe.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I mean, it was really, really cool. It's a really beautiful story about art and love and community and especially perseverance. There's a lot that they go through. Not just the fact that they're living in, an area, a part of the world that is economically, a hardship on them. But there's a lot more to it. I don't want to give too much away, but the movie took them 6 years to make.
Wow!
So it really spans quite a period of time, and we were really, really fortunate for seeing this at the festival, because after the screening, they had flown the kids there and they played their instruments for us. They played a few songs. So
that's incredible.
Yeah, it was a really great experience, especially having seen it, and it ended up winning the audience award, the World Cinema Audience Award at the festival. Oh, awesome! And it just was a lot of fun to watch, and it really gives you a lot of hope. The film, so
I like it.
I definitely recommend, if you get a chance to see it, if it comes out in theaters or if you get a chance to see it on video, please check it out.
Sounds beautiful.
Yeah, the guy who teaches the music, the guy who kind of kicked the whole thing off, he said something really, I thought was really interesting. His like sort of mentality regarding it was really about the community and about how, he said, the world gave us garbage and we gave them back music.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and somebody stood up, and it was like a really clear view of how skewed we take things here in our country. And they asked, how can I buy one of the instruments? Wow. They wanted to buy one of the instruments, thinking,
a garbage cello.
I think they thought it was cool.
Yeah.
And it would be neat to have. But I think also they were thinking, well, I could give them money.
Yeah.
And they could use that money for stuff. And they don't sell them.
And
they don't sell them for a few reasons. He said that if they sold them, it would create a price value for them.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, it would be dangerous for these kids to be walking around in this town because people would be trying to sell them. And and he said,
like what's happening with real instruments right here in the LA Unified School District.
Sure.
And I'll go into that.
Yeah. He said, not everything that has value has to have a price. And I thought,
that's a good one.
That's a really great quote for sort of the feel of the film.
Yeah.
Because there's so much that is valuable in this film and in the events that happens in their lives.
Wow.
And it's you'll laugh, and you'll have a really good time, and you really feel for these people. It's a really great story.
That's great. Landfill Harmonic. Keep your eyes out for it.
There's a great trailer out for it.
Nice. Yeah, I've seen that trailer, and I'm going to try to stifle a sneeze right now.
Yeah. All right, stifle that sneeze, yo. So I saw another film.
Okay.
Slightly more controversial in a weird way. I saw the new James Bond.
Spectre.
Now, I'm a big James Fond.
James Fond.
I can't even say his name. I'm a big.
But you're a big Jane Bond fan.
The knockoff DVDs from
James
overseas.
Fond.
I own all the Blu-rays.
Even for the Timothy Dalton ones.
I own every single one. Yeah.
Cool.
I'll tell you which one I don't own.
James Bond Jr., the cartoon?
I don't own that either. I don't own the Peter Sellers Casino Royale.
Ah.
I don't actually consider that to be a part of the series.
It's definitely different.
So, so I'm a big fan. I watched those movies with my dad as I was growing up.
Excellent.
So I have a fondness for them. We had an empty seat next to us at the theater for him. So I watched the film. I think there's a couple of weird maybe misconceptions going on with the film. It kind of got beat up by critics a little bit.
That's what I'm hearing.
And of the critics that I read, I don't read a ton of them. But the ones I read, I generally not always agree with, but I definitely respect their writing. Drew McWeeny over at HitFix is one of them. I really like his writing.
Cool.
He used to write for Ain't It Cool News.
All right.
And, he really, really didn't like it. He said it tainted all the other Daniel Craig films for him.
Whoa. That's how I feel about the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Okay. So I went into it, with, very cautiously. I didn't read anything really about the films, just what people were feeling about it.
All right.
And then afterwards came back and read the reviews, and some of the things in the reviews that people complained about were things that were actually explained in the film. Like, oh, this doesn't make sense. And I was like, yeah, there are scenes in the film where they explain this, so it does actually make sense. So,
right.
So I felt like there were some things that maybe people were missing about it. It is definitely a more fantastic James Bond than the last films, the last Daniel Craig films, in that the stunts are, things where you go, that can't happen, or no one would survive that.
Yeah.
So they sort of start to move out of the realm of this realistic, dark, gritty thing. It's still fairly dark, but not like Casino Royale. It's not dark like Skyfall.
There's no bottomless chair scene.
There is no bottomless chair scene. But I felt like at the end of Skyfall, they sort of put a little end cap on the dark, gritty, serious James Bond, and they were going to move that direction anyway. Yeah. So I felt like that was coming, and I think maybe some critics and some viewers were surprised by it. They didn't pick up on that at the end of Skyfall, and so they weren't prepared for it, and so that was off-putting to them.
Okay.
There is one pretty valid criticism that I thought that I've read several times, and that's it doesn't fit with the other films. And the valid part of that is they make a really concerted effort to connect it to the previous 4 films.
Oh, okay.
Or sorry, previous 3 films.
But then it doesn't fit.
They fit. The connection's there.
Sure.
And I feel like it makes sense for the most part. There's more story that could be told, I think.
Okay.
To make it feel better. But if you're going to connect this movie to the others, it tonally probably should be the same. And the fact that the tone is different, especially with the stunts and sort of the tongue-in-cheek, it's more the first 3 films were kind of the Sean Connery-esque era of Bond, and this was more of the Roger Moore era of Bond. And so, if you're going to try and connect them together, it probably should have a similar tone as the 3 previous films. So I think that's a pretty valid criticism for it. But I did like the film. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Do you worry that the next Daniel Craig James Bond might be more George Lazenby era?
I don't. I think
good.
If we get a one-off Bond, I think that's when we're going to worry about that. But I thought it was a fun film. I think Daniel Craig's going to come back. I think him sort of blustering about it is silly. I think he's going to come back. I mean, he was contracted for 5 films anyway.
Oh, okay.
Now I'm sure he can get out of it, but he's going to come back and do one more. I think. I don't think Sam Mendes will come back and do another one. No. But I would like to see Idris Elba be a James Bond.
Sure.
And after watching A Single Man, I started thinking to myself, man, Colin Firth, he could be James Bond.
Interesting. Well, now he's doing Kingsman.
And then I thought about that. I thought about the Kingsman thing, and I thought, well, he could be an interesting Bond.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the Kingsman character is very different.
But do you think are they going to make more Kingsman movies? I mean,
did you see the Kingsman?
I did. They might as well. It was a blast.
Let's throw a spoiler alert in here.
Oh, wait a minute. No, don't. Because I think I just realized. Okay, right.
So I think he could be an interesting James Bond. But we'll we'll end it there.
I'm James Bond.
Yeah.
I think Colin Firth is such a charmer. Don't get me started.
He is, I think he's so suave. And we'll talk about Single Man in a little bit, but seeing him in those '60s suits and driving that Mercedes like that with the wood paneling and stuff. He could be cool. James Bond. I got to see a screening of Girl with a Pearl Earring when I first came to town.
Mm-hmm. Colin Firth and Scarlett Johansson were there to do a Q&A.
Yeah. ScarJo was young.
Yeah. And, she's ScarJo. She's beautiful. Mm-hmm. She's, widely considered one of the most beautiful women out there. Colin Firth stole the show at that Q&A. That dude is so funny and charming.
Yeah.
And just, all of us were just like, Scarlett who? It was crazy. Yeah. I was 20 feet from both of them. All eyes on Firth. It was so weird.
I hear he's tall.
I don't remember him being that tall. Well, but then again, I didn't get all that close to him either.
You're tall. He's over 6 foot.
I hope.
Yeah.
I hope so.
But let's address the tall thing. If you remind me later, I got a little thing about the tall thing relating to Single. But I think we should jump into, unless you got anything else.
No, man, I'm good. If I think of something, I'll bring it up if it's appropriate. I guess I don't know.
Yeah. All right.
Are we going Single Man first?
No. We'll do An American in Paris first.
All right.
All right. Here we go. American in Paris. Everybody, I hope you watched it.
I hope you did too.
First of all, I had never seen this film.
I feel like we jinxed Paris by watching this film.
Oh, man. Let me address this again real quick.
Okay.
We always have these weird connections with our films, and either what's going on in the world or the fact that they randomly get paired together.
Yeah.
So there's this Paris thing, and also it's the both titles are one individual, An American in Paris,
and single man.
And I think that's also strange.
Yeah.
But anyways, let's jump into. Did you like this movie? Maybe I should ask you after we talk about it.
No, I'll say this. I can see its importance along the filmmaking timeline, I guess you could say. But I feel like now, in this day and age, this movie's just not for me, that's all.
Okay.
I'm not, having gone to school for theater and everything, I'm not crazy about musicals to begin with.
Oh, see, I love musicals.
And, I'm not crazy about dance numbers, especially 20-minute dance numbers. So, it's just not for me. I enjoyed it while I was watching it. You caught me tapping my toes, I bet.
Yeah.
Well, during all the songs and stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'll ever see it a second time.
All right, that's fair.
I said it.
The end is long. We'll address that in a moment.
It's quite the musical number. And again, it's beautifully done.
Yeah.
It's spectacular, but I'm just kind of like, I don't need to watch it again.
Yeah. So the movie was nominated for 8 Academy Awards.
Wow.
It won 6.
Wow, that's 75%.
So it won Best Screenplay, Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction, Best Score, Best Costume Design, and Best Picture.
But not Best Smile for Lisa.
No.
Interesting.
Lisa. So the producer, Arthur Freed, is really well known for doing movie musicals. That was sort of his thing. He's not really known for his dramas, although he did some poignant things.
Did he do Paint Your Wagon?
I don't believe he did Paint Your Wagon.
Oh, okay.
He did a lot of Gershwin-related type things, but so he was playing pool one night with Ira Gershwin, George Gershwin's brother. And late into the night, about 2 o'clock in the morning, he asked Ira Gershwin to sell him the rights to the name "An American in Paris."
Oh,
it's a very famous song.
All right,
which you hear the song quite a bit in the movie.
I'll believe you.
The ballet number is "An American in Paris."
That makes sense. All right.
So Ira Gershwin agreed to sell the rights to the name, but he stipulated that all of the music in the film had to be Gershwin music.
Wow.
So every song you hear in the movie, even there's a scene when they go to a club and there's a band playing in the background. They're playing a Gershwin song. Everything
that's
in the
cool.
movie is Gershwin. Yep. So the movie starts with our main character. He's a painter named Jerry Mulligan. He's played by Gene Kelly.
Right.
He narrates our introduction to Paris, and we see all these really famous locations outside the Opera House and Notre Dame and
Arc de Triomphe.
Arc de Triomphe.
The Eiffel Tower, of course.
Eiffel Tower.
That that fifth thing.
Yeah, sure. So Jerry lives in the tiniest apartment.
Yeah. Which he makes great use of.
It's a one-room apartment. His bed hangs from the ceiling. His tables hide in closets. He's got canvases and paint supplies everywhere. And so he narrates, and he wakes up in the morning, and you really kind of get to see the fact that Gene Kelly's a dancer in all things.
Yeah.
He's not actually doing a dance, but it looks like a ballet almost.
Yeah, yeah. He dances his way through his apartment especially.
Yeah. All of his movements are like really well choreographed. He does these flourishes with his arms. He uses his knees and his feet to, move things and close doors. And then he looks over and he sees a self-portrait he's done in charcoal, and he gives it one finishing touch, like a little line under the mouth to just make it perfect. And then he immediately takes a rag and he smears it.
Oh.
Kind of, in my opinion, no one's going to have him or his art. Not even himself.
Interesting.
And because he doesn't see, and we hear this a lot from him in the film, he doesn't think that he's ready to be a real artist. He doesn't think he's good enough.
Darn it, Jerry.
Come on, Jerry.
Get some confidence in yourself.
So then we meet Adam in narration.
Yes.
Adam is a composer and a pianist, and he narrates his own intro as well. He's also an American, and he's Jerry's friend. They live across the hall from each other in the same apartment building. And then he's followed by Henri, who introduces himself via narration. And Henri is Adam's friend, and he's this extremely well-known singer. When we see sort of a POV of him walking down the street, everybody recognizes him, waves to him, and says hello to him.
He is beloved in the streets of Paris.
Something I really liked about this intro thing is each person's introducing themselves, and the first people you see, so when Jerry introduces himself, there's a man and a woman, and they like embrace each other and kiss. And he's like, that's not me. And then we hear Adam's intro, and we see a man putting birds into a birdcage, and he's like, that's not me. He's too happy.
Yeah.
And then when we get Henri's intro, we see this mirror and a gentleman adjusting his hat and his tie, and he's like, that's not me. And then he steps in, and this idea of not exactly mistaken identity, but sort of hidden identity is important to the film. And I thought it was like a really nice, subtle touch to put in the film.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Can I point out one of my favorite quotes? I think it was Adam who said it when he was narrating his own introduction.
Absolutely.
When he said something about underneath this flabby exterior is an enormous lack of character. I thought that was a fun, deprecating way to introduce himself.
He's very self-deprecating.
Oh, yeah.
Henri goes to the cafe that Adam and Jerry, where they live above this cafe. He's there to meet Adam. And I wrote the wrong name down in my notes here.
Whoa.
And now the people who own the cafe, they fawn all over Henri.
Yeah, he's a star.
But they practically ignore Adam.
Well,
so, Henri comes in and they're like, he's like, the cafe owner's like, oh, you want an omelet? And we'll get you some coffee. And Adam is hollering out for coffee, and they just basically ignore him and fill up Henri's cup.
Yeah.
So Adam and Henri sit down for coffee downstairs, and Henri tells Adam about how he met this beautiful woman named Lisa.
Oh, yes. Not very beautiful, and yet she has great beauty.
Yes.
That's one of Henri's lines.
And she seems to be everything to Henri.
Oh, yeah.
So Henri describes her, and Adam sort of asks these questions. Oh, so you're saying she's this? And he's like, no, she's not this. She's also got these characters. And he's like, so then she's this. And he's like, no, she's also got these. So he keeps sort of like building the myth of Lisa.
Yeah. Lisa Bouvier. Which would have been Lisa Simpson's name if Marge had never married.
Right. So so as he describes Lisa and talks about all these personality traits, we get to see Lisa, and she dances, and it's one of the many kind of montage or dream sequences that we see.
Yeah, she's in different settings each time and different dresses.
Yep.
All in maybe like a 2-minute dance number kind of thing.
So we're seeing what this girl means to Henri and what his dream of her is through this. And it's important because the film is going to have all three of the men have moments like this in the film. So I really loved the scene. It was one of my favorite scenes in the film. because
and those two meet, or her dance introduction.
Her dance introduction. It's like really vivid and colorful.
Oh yeah,
all the sets are different colors. The different dance styles are really fun to watch.
Oh sure, and Lisa.
Lisa, she's played by Leslie Caron.
I'm not familiar with her other than this.
This is her first film. I don't know. I guess you haven't seen the movie Gigi.
I thought I had.
Academy Award nominated film.
Is it a musical?
Yeah, I believe so.
Then I might have blocked it from memory. I remember seeing it on the video shelf a lot.
Yeah,
when I worked in video stores.
Well, it's that one also has her. She's been in quite a few things. This was her first film though.
Cool.
Now Gene Kelly was insistent that they have an actual French girl play this part. He thought that the movie needed to feel more authentic.
Yeah.
And we'll kind of go into this in a little bit, but they actually did not shoot the movie in France. They
I didn't
shot the
think
movie,
so.
In California. And so that was another piece of like Gene Kelly's insistence that they have some authenticity. He was visiting France and he went to the ballet and saw this performance about the story of the Sphinx, and she was playing the Sphinx, and she was like up on this pillar, and he was just like captivated by her, and he asked the studio if he could do a screen test, and so they arranged a screen test, and she didn't even know who Gene Kelly was really.
Wow.
I mean, even though she's a ballet dancer, she didn't think much of it.
Yeah.
And she certainly didn't think she was going to do it. She thought that what's it going to hurt to go do the screen test and just kind of see what's going on? But I don't want to do this. I just want to be a classically trained ballet dancer for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And then they called her up and said, they want you for this movie. They want you in 3 days.
Wow.
So she went off to Hollywood to be in this movie.
Pretty fun.
Yeah. So Jerry comes downstairs with a load of paintings to sell.
Yeah.
He's going to sell those on the street corner.
And he seems to, at every corner, run into somebody else trying to sell their own paintings.
Right.
That's always fun.
So he stops in at the cafe, and Adam introduces Jerry to Henri. Jerry's, hard up for money. He's definitely that starving artist type.
Oh, yeah.
And he needs to borrow some money for lunch, and Adam doesn't have any, and Henri offers.
Mm.
And Jerry says he can't take it because he doesn't take money from someone he hasn't known for at least 15 minutes.
Ah.
And Adam's like, I've known him for 15 years. So Adam borrows the money from Henri and then loans it to Jerry.
Uh-huh.
And then Jerry delivers one of my favorite lines. He takes the money and then he walks up to Henri and he says, I wouldn't lend him money if I were you because he's a bum risk.
Gee, great.
So I thought that was like a fun little film. They proceed to sing a song. It's called By Strauss. They wanted to show not just this like the setting of Paris or just the setting of the cafe, and introduce the friendship of these three guys, but kind of also their lifestyle, this kind of bohemian lifestyle, where they're interacting with all the people, and the fact that even though two of these men are American, they're well loved by the people in the community. Everybody in the community walks up to watch, other vendors and neighbors and children. They all walk up to watch them sing and dance this song. And even the cafe people, like the people that own the building, even though these guys are poor and probably don't make their rent on time kind of thing, they're so loved by these people that they skate by.
I like that.
Jerry heads out to his corner, and along the way, like you said, he greets a whole bunch of different painters, right?
Sure does.
Do you remember any of the
5 or 6? I think
any of the painters.
I honestly don't.
Cool. So he like what I remember about the painters is that he each of the painters is painting a different style of art. Right. Some are doing like one guy's doing some more abstract stuff, and when he picks up the painting, the guy has to correct him and turns it up. Jerry's got it upside down. And then there's a woman, I think, selling kind of impressionist type paintings. And then he sees this older guy sitting down, and we don't see what he's painting. Yeah. But Jerry walks by it, and then he stops, and he looks like he's got this shocked look on his face. So
it's a Wang.
I predict it's a self-nude portrait.
Whoa.
That is my,
they never show it, huh?
They never show.
That's
the painting.
Right.
So I think that it's at least a nude.
It's got to be something startling.
It's an older, stout kind of gentleman, I think. Lends the idea that maybe it's a self-portrait nude. So Jerry gets to his corner, he hangs his art, and this American girl with terrible French comes up. She's just struggling to speak French to him.
Yeah, but she's got she's got like a stagey Southern American accent, but she's
yeah.
speaking French with it, and it's pretty funny.
Parlez-vous?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Jerry's super rude to her because she, he's like, look, I'm from. I think he says he's from Jersey.
Yeah.
And so she talks to him and tries to like critique his work, and he cuts her off, and he's kind of rude to her, and he basically tells her to get lost.
Yeah, that's mean.
He doesn't want her input, and so the girl walks off, and then Milo walks up.
Yeah, Milo.
She's a woman about Jerry's age. I feel like she's middle aged.
Yeah, I'd put her at early 40s, maybe.
Sure, and so probably Gene Kelly was too.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
She introduced herself as Milo, as in Venus Duh.
Yeah. I actually accidentally wrote her name down as Venus Dieu at first, and I'm like, wait, that can't be your name.
No. So she loves 2 of his paintings. She likes all of his artwork, but she loves 2 of his paintings, and she offers to buy them. Ooh,
was that your phone?
My phone. Oops, got to put that on silent.
It sang to us.
Yeah. Jerry's super surprised when she offers to buy the artwork because he's never really sold any before, and so she asks him how much, and he has no idea what to reply to her. So she offers 15,000 francs.
Wow.
Which is like $50 a piece.
Hey.
But hey,
for your first sale.
Yeah. And I think at that time period, I think $50, post World War II.
Yeah, that goes a long way.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Jerry was he was in the military, and that's how he wound up in Paris, right?
Yeah.
Did we mention which branch?
I don't remember.
I almost think it was Navy, but yeah, I really don't remember.
That could be, yeah.
Maybe Army, maybe Marines. I forget.
So she goes to pay him, and she doesn't have the money in her
wallet. Oh, Milo!
And she says that Jerry could go back with her to her hotel so she can pay him, and he agrees. And so he starts to pack up his paintings, and he turns around, and a limo pulls up to pick them up. So obviously Milo has money.
I would say so.
So at the hotel, she pays him, and they discuss sort of where to hang the paintings in the hotel room, which I thought was interesting. So Milo basically lives in this hotel room in Paris.
Yeah.
She talks about how she's from America and she has a place in America, but she spends most of her time here. So the fact that she can hang up paintings means she really does.
Oh yeah.
She can put holes in the wall. She really does live there.
She's not concerned about that security deposit.
No. So she pays him, and she invites Jerry to a party. She says, "What are you doing tonight? Why don't you come back?" That there's one extra girl, and she could use another guy. So he agrees. He's a little reluctant, but he agrees. So Jerry is taken back home in the limo, and everybody sees him coming back in this limo, this convertible limo, and everybody's waving. And the kids are running next to it and stuff, and everybody's really excited. And he gets out, and before he goes in, the kids all sort of accost him because he gives out American bubble gum, and he doesn't have any on him. But he gives them an English lesson instead.
Oh, is this when they sing "Who Could Ask for Anything More"?
Yeah. So this was. Oh, what?
I'm just saying that might have been one of the most annoying.
Oh, it was my favorite
things
scene
I've ever seen. With the kids screaming?
It was one of my favorite scenes.
Oh, man. It drove me nuts.
No, I liked it. Oh, that's great to have such a varied opinion on it.
I think Gene Kelly handled it beautifully. But those kids, they could have gotten rid of half of those kids and maybe told them all to tone it down a little.
I liked conceptually how they changed the song.
Okay.
I think that's what drew me into it, was having the interaction with the kids and having doing that as an English lesson. And I think,
that part's fine. But let's tone down those kids.
Yeah, well, the song had just been done in a movie just a couple years prior with.
Oh, really?
I think maybe Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney did it in a movie a few years prior. So it was not like this was an unseen song in a film, and it's a Gershwin song, so people knew it. So the fact that they found kind of a unique way to present it, and it sort of fit with the movie. Yeah. And I really like the dance number in it. I really I thought that was a lot of fun. He does all these different dance, sort of tap styles and stuff in the movie, including the Charleston. And
he tolerates those children.
He tolerates the children
screaming in his face every 10 seconds.
So he teaches the kids the word "I got," and he points to them, and the kid goes "I got," and he goes "rhythm."
You toned it down just now, thankfully. Those kids were screaming it.
Yeah, they're learning a word. And,
like, I wanted Oompa Loompas to show up and just take some of them away and drown them in a chocolate river. So,
anyways, I thought it was a really fun scene to watch. You hated it. That's okay. That's what makes the world go around. And that's it's great because we don't have a lot of, like, really different opinions. Like,
that's true.
Like, generally, we can kind of see things the other person's way.
Yeah.
Really easily. So it's kind of nice to have a difference of opinion on the show.
I can see it your way. Oddly enough, shortly after this scene, in my notes, I literally just wrote, "I have no use for this kind of movie." I think that's how tainted I was by that, by those kids in that musical number.
So later in the evening, Jerry shows up at Milo's hotel, and he finds out that the party is just him and Milo.
Oh yeah.
And he gets kind of huffy.
It was a lot like Sunset Boulevard.
It was a lot of Sunset Boulevard kind of ish things in it. So he gets all huffy and he throws the money down the table and starts to grab his paintings. He tells her he doesn't need the money this bad and that she needs companionship to find it somewhere else. He doesn't have to sell himself.
Yeah. And he's no gigolo.
Yeah, and she explains to him that she knew he wouldn't come any other way, and he sort of admits that. And that she just wanted to get to know him better and sort of become his benefactor, his patron.
Oh, yeah.
And so she wants to help him get set up for galleries and make his work known. And that kind of wins him over. And so he offers to take her out to a nightclub, a restaurant.
They go to listen to some jazz.
They do. Now, they thought about getting food at the hotel, but they knew that was going to be expensive. So she knows this place that's not very expensive that he can take her.
All right.
So they get there, and it is bustling.
Oh, yeah.
A friend of... so they sit down and they have some conversation and chit-chat and get to know each other. And a friend of Milo's is there and pulls them over to another table with some other artists. And when they go to sit down, that's when Jerry sees Lisa for the first time. And he can't take his eyes off her. Now, if you remember... Henri told Adam, but Jerry wasn't there for the conversation about Lisa. So he has no idea who she is.
Right.
So he sees her, and he just starts staring at her.
Oh, yeah.
He's a creep.
He's creeping big time.
And she is clearly uncomfortable by the fact that he's staring at her.
Yeah.
And Milo notices this, and she starts to get a little upset.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds like she wants more than to be his patron.
I'll say.
So a dance number comes on, and people get up to dance. Milo's friend pulls her up to the dance floor.
Yeah.
And Jerry stays behind, and then he decides he wants to dance with Lisa, so he sort of tricks her into dancing with him by pretending he knows who she is. Someone there at the restaurant told him her name. And
I forget, is she already dancing with somebody and he cuts in on it?
No, okay. He gets her up from the table with the people that she's visiting with.
Oh,
she's extremely annoyed by it.
Mm-hmm.
So Milo dances with her friend, and that's when we learn that she's done this artist benefactor thing before.
Ooh.
In the hopes of finding love.
I'm listening.
So on the car ride home, Jerry's like on cloud nine because he met Lisa, and he's completely oblivious to Milo being upset until, of course, she tells him that he's being rude.
Oh, yeah.
And that he didn't care about her feelings. Whoa, boy.
Whoa, boy, indeed.
She throws a fit. And so he has the car pull over, and he gets out and walks home.
They're basically having their first lovers spat, and it's only been like a day or two.
And they're not lovers.
Right.
So the next day, Jerry calls Lisa at her work. And she is super annoyed by this and tells him to buzz off. So how you doing there? He's intently looking at his notes.
I'm trying. I'm reading with my notes to see if we skipped over anything.
Yeah, I don't want to skip over something that you maybe made a note of. So just stop me when you got something, pal.
No, I think we're both up to speed here.
So he sits down at the cafe, and after getting off the phone with Lisa, and Milo shows up. He sees the limo's there, and then all of a sudden Milo sits down next to him.
Mm-hmm.
And she tells him that she's going to show his art to critics and some gallery curators. And so he's like super excited by this.
Sure.
Like it's still on, even though she was upset with me. So on Cloud 9, Jerry goes to visit Lisa at her work, which is like a perfumery.
Yeah. How, again, did she mention it when they danced, or did he just... I forget how he found her there. But
someone told her when they told him about her when they said her name.
Yeah, because my note is Jerry stalks Lisa at the perfume shop.
He kind of does. So he goes there, and follows her around, and she's helping this middle-aged American woman buy a perfume that hopefully her husband will like in America. And so he helps her sell to the woman and convinces her which one to get. And that slowly kind of starts to wear down Lisa's...
down.
A little bit. And then she still is like, no, and, you're serious and kind of creepy and too aggressive. And he's like, no, I can let loose and be fun. And he like pretends to like drink some of the perfume. And he's silly. And so she laughs and she agrees to meet up with him after a date that she has that night. Of course, we know that that's Henri that she's dating.
No, dear sweet Henri.
I want to say right now, I do not love how he courts this woman.
How Jerry does?
Yeah, I don't like how aggressive he is. And even Jerry admits that it's aggressive. It's bothersome to me. It feels more than just like chauvinistic to me. It feels very caveman-y to me.
Yeah. But there was a lot of that going around back then.
Yeah, I guess so.
I mean, fortunately, we are raised in a more enlightened time.
Yeah.
Back then, I was just watching something else recently where, a younger guy was talking to his girlfriend's grandma, and she said, like, back in those days, a guy in your neighborhood just came by and said, "You're beautiful and I love you," and then eventually you got married to him. It's just, that's sort of what this is.
Yeah. So Jerry goes home, and he sings a song with Adam because, of course, he's in love already. And he's singing about being in love, and Adam's sort of annoyed by that, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Adam doesn't really have time for that kind of love. He does have love, but not that kind. So
he seems to mostly just want to play his piano very well.
Yes.
Is this when he has his
no,
dream?
That's a little later.
Okay.
So Adam calls Henri a little bit later, and it's dinner time. And, of course, Adam's hungry because he's also a starving artist, and he wants to come over. But Henri is with Lisa, so he says no.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Henri tells Adam that he has a performance that night and he should meet him there. And then Lisa's like, "Oh, you have a performance later tonight?" Knowing that she's supposed to be there.
Right.
For that kind of thing. And, of course, Henri wants her to be there, so that's an issue for her meeting with Jerry. So, regardless, she goes to meet Jerry at a cafe that night after dinner with Henri.
She's a cheater.
And they go and sit down, and people kind of start looking at her, and she gets really uncomfortable. And so they get up and they leave. And
that makes sense.
Jerry's like, let's just go on a walk. They hold hands. Let's walk along the river.
Yeah.
And they eat some candy bars.
Like that ABBA song.
And they hang out and they talk, and they definitely fall for each other.
Ooh, do they?
So I want to talk about the filming location. We talked a little bit about how it was not filmed in Paris.
Right.
But it does have a pretty authentic look to it. And it's quite a massive undertaking. If this is in Paris, they built a Paris set.
Yeah.
Now they shoot, they have this conversation on the bank of the Seine.
Yeah. Or the Seine,
sure.
Something like that.
And that's also kind of amazing that they built this bridge and the Seine, and Notre Dame's in the background.
Right.
They built all this stuff to, for this movie. They shot the movie on the MGM backlot.
Whoa.
And they shot second unit stuff actually in Paris. So all that stuff at the very beginning where you see like the Eiffel Tower and the Arc de Triomphe and all that stuff.
Yeah.
They shot that, and then they also shot some stuff that they used for rear projection a little bit later in the film.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because Gene Kelly wanted to be there. He wanted to shoot this in Paris, and they were like, no.
Well, sure.
So, which is great because it gave him the budget for this big dance number at the end of the movie, which again will
with like 1,000 dancers in it.
Yeah, I thought the bridge set was, in particular, was especially amazing.
Yeah, yeah, it looked. I mean, I've never been to Paris, but I've seen other things that were actually shot around those bridges, and it looked totally legit.
Yeah. They had this cameraman named Ray June. He's sort of uncredited as a cinematographer for this.
All right.
He's a cinematographer on like 150 other things, but
way to go, Ray.
Yeah. So he came in. He worked like tirelessly on this, especially this set. And so you can see like sort of how he lit Notre Dame in the background.
Cool.
And like parts of it and parts of it he didn't. Lights reflecting off the water, and they actually had to cheat some of that stuff because the way the angle that the camera was at for where they were along the riverbank, they couldn't get the lights to reflect off the water, so they built these special lighting rigs to go under the water. So the lights that you see reflecting on the water are actually in the water.
Wow.
Yeah, and
that's dangerous.
Yeah, the idea was to make it look like a real moving river.
Yeah.
And the depth of the river was only a few inches.
Cool.
But it looked great. I mean, it looks like the real deal. It's got real movement and stuff to it. So
it is impressive.
Yeah. So
impressive.
Yeah. So they're having this like little moment, and then Jerry sings the song called "My Love Is Here to Stay," which is a song written in like, I don't know, I think it was like 1938 or something. So it's an older song. It was very obscure at the time that they made this movie, but it had been around for a while. So when the movie, it was actually written for a different movie that came out in 1938.
Oh,
so,
yeah?
Yeah.
Which movie? Do we know?
Off the top of my head, I don't.
Oh, man.
I'm sorry. I didn't put that in my notes.
It was called Hitler's A-Comin'.
It was not.
That's not what it was called.
But the point is, people didn't really know about the movie. It was a small film, and nobody really knew about the song. It was like very obscure. After this came out, the song became very popular, and this is a song that
as it should,
I've heard. I mean, I'm a big fan of the Harry Connick Jr. version.
Oh yeah, sing a little of it for me now.
I'm not going to, but he does sing it in the movie When Harry Met Sally. It's on that soundtrack.
Oh,
so, but this him singing to her is, I think, the moment he really wins over Lisa.
Yeah.
He sings and they dance together, and of course they're both these beautiful dancers. So they're singing and dancing on the banks of the Seine, and of course in the dance they kiss. I thought it was kind of a really interesting choreographed kiss. Dance move. And then a few minutes later, Lisa realizes that it's like super late. It's like 11 something, and so she like decides she has to rush off. But
she's got to get to Henri's Stairway to Paradise performance.
Yes, so I'm glad you brought that up, because she starts to go up the stairs and he stops her and he's like, "We have to see each other again." She's like, "Yes, we do." And she goes and she kisses him on the stairway. He kisses her on the stairway, and then we go into a performance of Stairway to Paradise,
right?
Which I think is really, really interesting.
That also had about 1,000 dancers in it.
Yeah. So she runs up the stairs, back to her comfort, back to her home, back to her future.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
And then
with Henri.
Yeah, and I thought this set was really cool too. So it's like this big like concert hall set, and it's like really brightly pink.
Yeah.
And they have these light up stairs that when he starts stepping up and moving up the stairs, they light up. And I had these women posing as statues holding candelabras. And I was really, for some reason, kind of drawn to the candelabras.
Yeah.
I know I kind of joked when the curtain rose up next to the candelabras, like, "Oh, that's not safe," but the candelabras were, of course, electric.
Thankfully. But
I was intrigued by the candelabras because they were stationary, like they were actually part of a statue, and the women were real people. So it looked like they were holding the candelabras.
Yeah.
Really, they were just holding on and resting their arms.
That sounds like the more fun way to do it. Let me tell you.
Yeah, it looked really. I don't know. I was intrigued by that, and I thought it was kind of cool. But so, anyways, he does this really cool performance. He starts to sing in French, and then he sees his American friend, and he addresses that in the audience, and then he sings in English for his American friend. And that's important because after the performance, we see Lisa running up the street, and she's coming to the back entrance where Henri is coming out with his American friend, and the American friend wants to bring him to the U.S.
Ooh.
So, but I think more importantly, Henri has no idea that Lisa wasn't there.
Right.
Even when she was like going to apologize, he kind of cuts her off. And he basically says, "Hey, you know what? We should get married and move to America."
Ooh, boy.
And she's like, "All right."
Yikes.
So the next day, it's very clear that Jerry is lovesick.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a nuisance that he's going to have to go meet with his benefactor, who's going to make his career, because he just wants to sit there and think about Lisa all day. And
because he knows his benefactor is trying to get him to fall in love with her herself.
Right.
Milo. Which, God bless her. She's a sweet gal. But she's clearly, she's using her money to influence this guy.
So the limo shows up, and he leaves Adam there. And Adam like kind of lays back on like a little settee type thing. Couch. Something.
Yeah.
And this is where we get to see Adam's dream.
Oh,
about love. And what Adam loves is music.
Right.
And himself.
Kind of himself. He appears as the piano player in his dream.
Yep.
And then also as a few of the other instrumentalists.
The violinists and the timpani.
And then a few of the audience members.
And the conductor.
And the conductor, that's right.
Yeah. And he plays this really like kind of beautiful piece that's accompanied by himself on the orchestra.
Yeah.
They use a lot of like trick photography in that. And, 7 of him playing the violin.
Right. That was funny.
Yeah. And I like how much he's cheering himself on as the audience member. So.
Right. He loves music, that guy.
Milo takes Jerry to some apartments and shows him a door with his name on it.
That's right.
Mulligan. They go in and find a much larger space than his apartment.
Oh, yes.
And it's full of like new canvases and paint equipment. And of course, Jerry's like super resistant. He's uncomfortable with the whole money thing, especially because he knows he doesn't have feelings for this woman.
Yeah.
And he feels like she's doing it because she wants his hot body.
Whoa.
So she goes on to tell him that she's arranged this gallery show for him, and it's in 3 weeks. So he's got to get to painting.
That's so soon.
And he puts up.
Wait, is it 3 weeks or 3 months?
I think it's 3 weeks.
I thought for sure she had said months.
Did you write months? Maybe it was months. I thought it was weeks, but it could be months.
I thought it was months. Oh,
3
boy.
somethings.
Right.
So he eventually comes around to the idea, and he does give in, and that leads us to this Paris painting montage, which is where they use the rear projection of the stuff that they shot.
Jerry's just running all around the city painting every beautiful thing he can see.
But most importantly, from a filmmaking aspect, they set something up in this scene that you have no idea that they're setting up, and I'm going to address it when it comes up a little bit later. I know you got that look on your face, and you're like, "What's going on?"
I'm trying to remember.
It's a very, very subtle thing that you would have to really be in the know to get.
Huh.
So somebody would have to tell you, which I'm going to do.
Please do now.
So Jerry, no, I'm going to do it.
Oh.
Jerry eventually meets up with Lisa, but he's got his paintings with him, and so he's got to drop his stuff off at his real apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And they decide to take a cab there, and they pull up to the cafe, and she knows that Adam and Henri live/visit there. So she refuses to get out.
Ooh.
And presumably she knows Adam. I mean, if Adam's such a good friend of Henri's, she knows Adam.
Right.
And Adam's sitting in the cafe, and she's like, "I'm not getting out of the cab." So Jerry's like, "Okay, I'm going to go put the stuff up, and I'll be right back." And Lisa takes off in the cab, leaving Jerry there alone.
That's right.
And so he sits down.
Well, I think because she does indeed spot Adam.
She sees Adam.
Yeah.
In there. Yep.
So she's just like, "Sacre bleu, get me out of here."
So she has a kid bring a note to Jerry saying, "Meet me in our spot."
Ah.
So Jerry's sitting there with Adam, having some coffee, and Adam's having coffee, and he starts discussing this girl that he's in love with, and he tells Adam her name, and Adam spits out he spills his coffee as well.
Yeah, all over his shirt.
Yep. And so then Adam orders a bourbon, and that's when Henri shows up.
Oh boy!
And Henri tells them he's gonna get married to his girl, and Adam spills his bourbon all over himself. So Jerry fills Henri in that he's in love, but the girl is holding back. Now, of course, we know that's because she's engaged to Henri.
Yep.
So Henri unknowingly gives Jerry advice on how to get the girl.
Oh my gosh!
During this whole conversation, Adam's kind of like shaking, and he's distraught over about what's sort of about to blow up in front of him. He knows that any second the truth will come out.
Yeah.
So he like spills his drinks. He absentmindedly takes other people's drinks. He ruins his cigarettes multiple times.
Darn it.
He lights and smokes 2 inadvertently. He kind of contorts another. He smokes a kind of a broken cigarette by the end.
Poor Adam.
Henri tells Jerry to just ask for her hand in marriage, and that you only find the right woman once. So which one of these guys has found the right woman is the question.
Oh boy.
Adam goes catatonic as these two men start singing a song about the woman they love.
Yeah.
I think they sing Wonderful, right? It's Wonderful?
That sounds correct.
It's wonderful. All right, so after that scene, it culminates to them just belting out the last notes out on the city streets. This really kind of big, wide crane shot of the Parisian street. So Jerry rushes to Lisa and tells her that he's in love with her.
Oh, boy.
And then she tells him that she's engaged to Henri. And she tells him his name.
Oh, why, Lisa?
So
she's tearing me apart, Lisa.
Yeah. Crushed.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry leaves and decides, I'm going to rebound with Milo.
And rebound he does.
Poor Milo.
Yeah.
I feel bad for Milo in this film. So he tells her, so he goes to see Milo, and he's like, oh, you're beautiful. Does anyone ever tell you that? And, not often enough, that kind of thing. And he tells her he's going to take her to a costume ball full of batshit insane art students. Now, he doesn't say that, but that's where he does. He's, there's this big annual ball, and I'm going to take you to it. It's full of art students. They get there, and people are jumping off of balconies into the crowd. There's people everywhere.
Yeah. Everywhere.
Stupid, weird costumes.
They're all wearing black and white costumes.
Which is also really important.
They're all going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
They are nuts. Adam's there playing the piano. Milo gets picked up by a random person and dumped into his lap. Now, Lisa and Henri are also there, but they don't see them right away. And this one woman keeps jumping off the freaking balcony. Same woman over and over again.
Yeah, and she's just getting caught by a friend, right? Like there's just
random people. One time it's Jerry.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's a bad idea.
It's terrible. It's art students. Don't do that.
If you're going to jump off of a high place, make sure you're landing in water.
Yeah. So Adam and Milo sort of meet surreptitiously, and they discuss Jerry without exchanging info about who they are, but they both know Jerry. And it's implied that maybe Milo has eyes on Adam, sort of the way she's talking to him and sort of sweet-talking him a little bit. Maybe he's going to be her next project. And Adam really kind of puts an end to that. I think he's onto her. And he tells her that about how he's worried about Jerry because of his sponsor.
Yeah.
And she's like, why? And he says, she's got more nerve than money.
Oh.
Which she doesn't really like. And she tells him that she is Jerry's sponsor. And Adam says,
I know.
Yeah, and walks away, leaves her behind. Jerry and Milo run into Henri and Lisa. And Jerry and Lisa pretend not to know each other. They're like, oh, how did you? Nice to meet you. Once the couples go their separate way, though, Henri realizes there's something wrong with Lisa. Like, they're trying to dance, and she's just super distracted and sad. Meanwhile, Jerry confesses to Milo. He pulls her off to the side, and he says, look, I'm not happy-go-lucky tonight. I've been lying. I'm heartbroken.
Yeah.
And that's when Milo realizes it's Lisa.
From the jazz club.
And Jerry kind of leaves her there, and Milo is left standing there in tears. It's very sad for her.
Sad for everybody at this point.
And I think they wanted Milo to kind of seem a little more schemy, a little bit more man-eatery.
Oh yeah.
And I think she ends up coming across. They actually filmed a scene at the end of the film with Milo.
Oh yeah.
Where I think Jerry apologizes to her or something. I haven't seen the deleted scene. I don't know if it's actually on the disc or anything, but apparently they felt that it made Jerry look bad.
Oh.
At the end of the film, and they didn't want to do that, so they cut that scene. And Nina Foch, who played Milo,
yeah,
she had said that besides that, they called her and said, "Look, we had to cut this," but which she thought was sad because she had delivered sort of an impromptu moment in there that everybody loved.
Yeah.
But she said, beside the fact that it made Jerry look bad, the movie was over at that point.
Yeah.
They had resolved it, so when your movie's over, why add another scene? So I thought that was very
touche,
astute thing for an actor to say. Usually, a lot of times actors will be like, "No, don't cut my scene."
Right.
So Jerry's sad as well. He goes out on a balcony to be by himself, and he starts sketching. And he quickly sketches this plaza area with the Arc de Triomphe, that big monolith thing. I don't know what that's called.
The big monolith.
Yeah, there's a little pointy. It looks kind of like the Washington Monument.
Oh, an obelisk, like an Illuminati obelisk.
Yeah, some type of obelisk.
I forget what the one's called there. Continue.
Lisa shows up, and she tells him that she loves him, and it's terrible to see him this way when he should really have his arms around her.
Oh boy!
Jerry tears the sketch in half and tells her that he's painted all this amazing and beautiful stuff, and Paris is amazing, but the more beautiful it is, the more it's going to hurt being without her. And they embrace in a hug, and then she runs off. And then the camera moves back, and we see that Henri was there off to the side the whole time.
He heard the whole thing.
And
and Henri kills Jerry.
No, that's not what happens.
No?
Nope.
I thought for sure he comes out and he stabs Jerry with a love knife.
A love knife, no. So the torn drawing gets blown away in the wind, and Lisa and Henri get in a cab to leave.
Oh, darn it.
And in the cab, as it's driving away, we see Henri can see that Lisa is hurting. So he knows the truth, and he knows she's in deep emotional pain.
Yeah.
Then we finally get Jerry's dream montage as the wind blows the pieces of the torn sketch back together, and we get to see what Jerry believes life will be like if he could just be with Lisa.
Yeah.
So the painting montage earlier in the film where they're doing the rear projection and he's painting all these different things in Paris.
Right.
They set up the color palette for this finale of the film. So every time it cuts to a different moment of him painting very subtly, whether it's a child's toy or a dress or an awning or the yellow of a building, they're all pieces of this color palette they're going to use for this massive sequence at the end.
Massive is an understatement.
And they also introduce the flower in that montage, which is really like central to this dance number.
Ah, yes.
Because he paints the portrait of Lisa and he gives her the flower to hold.
Right.
So the last 17 minutes of this movie is a ballet number.
Is it only 17?
It's only 17 minutes.
It felt like 170.
No.
And it felt like 20. Though,
it's long, but it's a ballet. It definitely feels like, quite the undertaking. So, and it starts inside Jerry's sketch, and it's sort of I think implied that all the locations are sketches of Jerry's. They're all done in the same style.
Yeah,
really simple, and so it starts black and white, and this is where you mentioned the outfits inside the party were all black and white,
right?
And that's really important because the scene starts black and white. I mean, Jerry's kind of faint, but he's in color, and the rose is in color. But the drawing is black and white, and when he goes and he picks up the rose in this dream sequence, the background, the art, gets splashed with all this color.
Right.
And I think that the lead up to that, this whole scene all in black and white, was designed to make that sort of like a real moment where you're like inundated with color all of a sudden.
I can dig that.
So this sequence... it takes place in various sketches or various locations in Paris. It took a month to film.
Wow, really?
And it took them to build the sets 6 weeks.
Jiminy.
30 painters working around the clock. And cost $500,000.
Just for the 17-minute dance number.
Just for their 17-minute dance
Holy shnikes.
So, a $500,000 17-minute set.
Wow.
Yeah. Obviously, it's a massive undertaking. There's giant fountains that look kind of like they're frozen because they're drawn.
Yeah.
Right. So they're frozen in time. There's this massive cast.
So many dancers.
A huge set.
So much costuming. So many wild wardrobe choices.
There's this really intense lighting scheme that they've got going on. And then this elusive Lisa traveling from location to location that he's trying to get this girl.
Right. She just keeps popping up in the various little dance companies and driving Jerry Mulligan crazy.
So he's like in Parisian squares, he's on bridges, there's flower merchants, he goes to the zoological garden. There's a steamy fountain sequence that's just the two of them.
Oh yeah.
Where they're in the middle of a big giant fountain.
Oh yeah.
The opera house. Moulin Rouge.
Yeah.
And then...
Oh, yeah, they bump into Toulouse-Lautrec at one point.
They do.
And then they go into kind of a weird Bob Fosse kind of dance. Well, Jerry does.
Yep.
And he's got no bulge on the front of his pants. That really tripped me up.
I didn't like his hat in that scene. It was weird.
I don't remember his hat. I was too busy looking at that lack of bulge.
Okay. And then they go back to the original sketch.
Yes.
All the locations all have different... they're all inspired by different artists, French.
Oh, that's cool.
Artists. So there's Van Gogh and Manet and various the Toulouse-Lautrec and various others. So
and Mulligan.
It's true. The flower from the portrait that he picks up at the beginning of the sequence kind of shows up, and it's kind of almost as elusive as Lisa. Like she'll either have it, like he'll find it, or she'll either have it, or he'll pull it out of the flower cart. It's like the only red flower and a bunch of white ones, and it's sort of representative of this thing that he didn't think he wanted or needed, and now he's just trying to hold on to.
Yeah.
And he ends up back in the original sketch without the girl.
No.
And only the flower.
Why?
So he comes out of his daydream back at the party, and he starts to go back in, and then he hears the cab return. and he turns around, and Henri kisses Lisa goodbye, and she and Jerry run down and up the steps.
Oh yeah,
to paradise,
and
into each other's
with
arms.
a new step every day.
Yeah. And that's the end of the movie.
Wow, they made it.
Girl. Now we talked about that. There's a ballet at 17 minutes. The last 20 and a half minutes of the film, there's no dialogue.
That's true.
So it's almost like 20-minute ballet. But so that is An American in Paris. So you didn't love this film.
I'm not crazy about it. Like I said, I can see the merit. I didn't have a bad time watching it. But I just have no reason to watch it again.
I'd watch it again if somebody had never seen it and they wanted to watch it.
All right.
If somebody's like, I really want to see this, and I would gladly show it to someone. But we watched it and I watched it again. So
that's dedication,
I've
Holmes.
seen it twice now, so I'm good for a while in this film. But
I wish they had shown us exactly what Lisa said to Henri to get him to agree to turning the cab around and letting her go forever.
I don't think she had to say anything.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. There's a reference earlier in the film that she makes about when she tells Jerry that she's engaged to Henri, and she says, he took me in during the war.
That's right.
Her parents were killed.
He's essentially her foster father.
He raised
that's
her.
Right.
And she says, I owe him everything. And I loved him at the time. Like I fell in love. Like as a 14-year-old, she fell in love with this older man who like took her in and saved her life.
Inappropriate.
Yeah, but I get that part of it, right? And she says he eventually grew to love me, like implying that there was nothing when she was a child, but because she loved him and she doted on him, that eventually he grew to love her.
Sure.
But that's important, I think, into letting her go, because he's only ever wanted good, something good for her.
True.
And I don't think, he may have fallen for her, but that wasn't necessarily what she was destined for, and I think he knew that.
Maybe that's it. Yeah.
I'm not sure the look that he gives her in the cab when she's like crying and looking out the window, she's turned away from him.
Yeah.
He has this really pained, sorrowful look on his face, like he knows what he has to do. I'm not sure she says anything to him.
Henri is a very enlightened guy.
Yeah, he seems like a nice guy. Possibly
Possibly the most enlightened of the trio of these men. Huh. Well, to Henri.
This is a movie that's really, really clearly about celebrating art and the fact that Paris has given us so much.
Sure.
So just to kind of address it back to the thing we talked about at the very beginning.
And then 2 days after we watched it,
terrible things happened.
Kablooey.
And so again, I think this movie was timed really well for us, having just like watched the celebration of art and what Paris gives to the world.
I can agree with that.
So tell me about your coffee countdown for this.
0 minutes, baby.
0
I didn't doze off once.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, it's certainly an easy movie to pay attention to. It's beautifully shot.
Yeah.
There are beautiful women. It's funny enough. It's entertaining enough, I don't exactly remember how much coffee or sleep I was on at the time.
Yeah.
But, coffee countdown. Didn't doze off once, I'm happy to say.
Some tea, I remember that.
I did have some of your iced tea.
I didn't see any coffee.
I think I had a cup of coffee maybe like within the hour before I came over, something like that.
Yeah.
But I really don't remember. Most times I'm like, okay, I'm on this much sleep and this much coffee, and here we go. This time, didn't make note of it. Stayed awake the whole time.
Interesting.
It is interesting, because then I stayed awake through the next movie, too. So I'll spoil that for you. 0 minutes, 0 minutes on the next movie, which was A Shingleman.
Yeah. Well, let's do something new.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm gonna read this thing real quick.
What is it?
So our friends over at Acid Ink Selections have
Acid Ink Selections.
Yep, they have a great wine suggestion for us, so you can have a perfect Paris-inspired movie night.
Oh.
So they say American entrepreneur, first in film, then wine. Mark Tarlov is an American, not in Paris, but just outside of Paris, in Burgundy and Oregon, directing some of the most exciting projects, focusing on Pinot Noir and Gamay. Mm-hmm. This episode's wine is Maison L'Envoyé Morgon Côte du Pays, 2012. So Beaujolais, once known only as a light fruity wine, has come of age, and in serious regions like Morgon, produce wines of deep dark fruits, but that are amazingly fresh and light on their feet, a la Gene Kelly.
I'll say.
Best part is you can find truly great quality for less than $25.
Nice.
That's a heck of a lot less than the $500,000 ballet finale of today's movie. And yet especially fitting for that scene.
Did they write that?
They wrote that.
That's great.
Yeah, so thank you very much for the wine suggestion. Everybody go check out that wine.
Mm-hmm.
We'll make a note of it in the description of the podcast as well, so that way you can see how it's spelled and whatnot.
Now I really want to drink a lot of wine.
Yeah, let's get you drunk.
I'm for it. I don't have to be anywhere important tomorrow.
Great.
Get me drunk.
Let's do it. All right. So thank you again to our friends at Acid Ink Selections. We're going to continue with that as a theme throughout our podcast from now on. We're going to have some
recommendations.
Wine recommendations. So enjoy, everyone. Thank you very much. So you want to talk about Single Man?
Sure.
Man, I got a lot of notes, man.
I've got 2 pages of notes myself.
Great.
A Single Man. Oh boy, this movie's pretty heavy.
Yeah, so
it's a heavy movie.
So I have a really detailed description of what happened in my notes. So I'm gonna let you talk.
Yeah, and
I'll just interject.
Chime in if you think I'm missing anything.
Sure.
Well, the movie opens with a very snowy road, and there's definitely a car accident. There's a car flipped upside down.
I want to correct you real quick.
Oh no, the movie opens with the body in the water.
Yes.
Yes. George's body. We don't know it's George for sure. We just see a naked man underwater. The camera's even deeper under the water. There's a very golden glow under there, and this naked body is sort of sinking. And it's
sinking is a good observation.
It's pretty I'll say, what's the word I'm looking for? Upsetting. Not quite morose. I was about to say morbid, but I feel like it's morose.
It's a little anxiety filled, I feel like, too. I think the idea of drowning is...
Yeah, because sweet George, he's having a hard time. So, from the drowning to now, a man lying dead under a turned over car out in the snow. If I'm not mistaken, there's some blood. There's a poor little dead dog next to him. And George, played by Colin Firth, comes walking in, lays down next to the dying man, played by Matthew Good.
Matthew Good.
And he kisses him, and then in that kiss, George wakes up, and he's alone in his bed. And it's pretty clear that these were 2 men who were in love, and this car accident indeed killed Jim. George was not there when it happened, but he's having these horrifying dreams where he is kissing Jim goodbye as Jim lays dying on the frozen roads in Colorado after a car accident.
And I actually think Jim's long dead in that sequence. His eyes are like real milky and stuff.
I don't know that I noticed that. Milky eyes.
Yeah. I think maybe it's and again, going back to anxiety, this idea that he didn't get to say goodbye, and we'll address that in a flashback a little bit later about not getting to say goodbye.
Oh, sure.
But I did have an interesting filmmaking note on that.
Let me hear it.
They shot that scene in the desert.
Really?
Yeah, they shot... that was the first day shooting, apparently, and they shot a scene that comes up later in the film where George and Jim are sort of sunning themselves on some rocks.
I remember that.
The infamous black and white photo that we see a little bit later.
Again, no bulge in that photo.
And so they shot that first, the sunning themselves in the desert first, and then they covered the desert ground with the snow and brought in the car, and there you go.
Sounds like a good use of a day.
Interesting use of a desert.
And Jim didn't have to lay there in actual cold snow the whole time, I'm assuming.
Right.
So that part's nice. And the poor dog.
That dog is was a cast. It was
a
cast of Tom Ford's real dog.
Oh.
And the dead dog cast shows up again later in the film. I'll point that out.
No. So George is the one who's been having this dream about kissing his boyfriend goodbye. Mm-hmm. And he wakes up, and I believe the line is, waking up begins with saying am and now. Is that correct?
I think it's and now, like, and now I am awake. Like, and now we begin.
I thought he said am and now, but maybe it is and now.
Yeah, because it's the beginning of the movie. It's also the beginning of the book, the first line of the book.
Oh, okay. So you've read the book, have you?
I have not read the book.
Neither have I. Don't feel bad. I'm not gonna be mad.
Fun tidbit.
I'll be honest with you. Right after that, I wrote a note that says, already trying too hard to be profound.
Oh, interesting.
And I felt that a couple other times during the movie.
There's a few times, but, I felt that way the first time. Again, watched this movie twice. Felt better about it the second time, and I sort of understood it, I think, a little bit better. There's a lot of...
What is going on out there?
Big truck driving by.
That lot of truck was our subtext just now.
Yeah, a lot of subtext in the movie. So he wakes up, and what happens next?
Well, he starts going about his day.
Can I point out something that I think is important to that last scene in the film?
Of course.
So when he wakes up, he moves his hand and finds that he has a pen that has leaked all over the sheets.
That's right.
It's like this black ink is all over the sheets and is left a stain there. And I think symbolically, it's the black stain in the spot where Jim used to sleep, and he reaches up with his hand and he touches his mouth, and it leaves one little bit of black ink on his lip, and I think it's like sort of the kiss of death, which will come back later.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. Oh, gross. Oh boy. All right, so George introduces himself. His name is George Falconer. Mm-hmm. I wrote down Falconer, ? Because I'd never met anybody whose last name is Falconer. It turns out Tom Ford, director of the film, I believe, had a relationship with someone whose last name was indeed Falconer. And apparently he also designs some sunglasses, and one style of the glasses within his line are called the Falconer, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe it was a watch. I think it was sunglasses. I forget exactly. Anyway, I've got a word here that says something good. Oh, Jennifer Goodwin, as George is going about his morning, finding the frozen loaf of bread still in the freezer that was supposed to be taken out yesterday, and, getting dressed and this, that, and the other thing.
I want to point out that as you see him getting ready, how meticulous everything is in the house. Like,
yeah.
And when he gets up, there's a bunch of stuff on the floor, right?
Yeah.
He walks, you see his bare feet walk kind of past all these things, and it's not like he has a messy floor.
Right.
He has systematically placed objects in a meaningful way on the floor. There's keys, there's notes, there's papers.
I do agree with that.
Really, really like systematically laid out on the floor.
Hmm.
And he says too, it takes a while to become George in the morning.
Yeah.
Which I think is like a symptom of like this systematic, meticulous nature.
Yeah. And the fact that he's severely depressed.
He's living a lie.
Oh, George. He winds up sitting down on the throne to, drop the kids off at the pool. Mm-hmm. And out his window, he sees a bunch of little children playing in the yard across the street. Yeah. And their mother, played by the lovely Jennifer Goodwin, is standing in the doorway yelling at the kids to come back into the house or whatever. Her husband shows up. I don't think we hear any dialogue between those two. But you can tell he's kind of a, early 60s kind of grump of a dad. He looks like he's, just pretty upset.
He means era by early 60s, by the way, not age.
Right, yes. Because this takes place in...
63.
Is it even 63?
I believe it's 63.
Okay. Kennedy's still alive, though. We know that much. And we even hear at one point on the radio some talk about the Bay of Pigs incident and all that jazz.
Actually, it's November 30th.
Yeah, when was Kennedy?
11/22.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so...
Wait, how do we know this is November 30th?
I know that because I learned that in my research. It takes place on... The day that the movie takes place is November 30th, and they pointed that out when he pulls up to the school in his fancy Mercedes.
Yeah,
was November 30th. That was shot on the day that the movie takes place.
Wow,
they made a point of saying that. Yeah.
Huh.
But anyways, so regardless, maybe it was 1962. I'm not sure because we do hear Kennedy's voice on the radio.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean Kennedy's alive.
It doesn't, but we also hear them talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis as a present-day concern.
True. Okay. So
maybe it is 62. I feel like Kennedy's still alive in this movie.
Maybe it's 60. I don't know. It's the 60s for sure.
There we go. So yeah, we see this taste for the neighbors across the street, and we get a hint that sort of the dad across the street is a pretty mean guy.
Yeah.
And then Ginnifer Goodwin spots George watching them from his window, not really realizing that it is the window right next to his toilet where he's going to the bathroom. He's embarrassed. He dodges out of the way. That's kind of that. Is this when he gets the call from Charlie?
He does.
/ Charlotte, played by Julianne Moore.
Yeah, and kind of leading up to that, there's a couple things with the, first the family across the way and not hearing anything. This idea that he sees them, but he doesn't participate.
Sure.
Right. I think that's why he can't hear them. Is like he's so removed from the situation.
Yeah.
There's also something we see. I don't remember if it's in the bathroom or if it's in another part of the house.
Okay.
But we see medication. We see a pill bottle on a table or a counter or something.
Right.
And I think that's important for later in the film. And then as he heads to the bathroom, he walks sort of past this giant like glass window that leads to like, I don't know, like not an atrium, but like a little courtyard area outside.
Yeah. And
he stops because he gets this image of Jim playing with the dog outside.
All right.
And when he gets that in the present, everything is very desaturated. It's almost even black and white. It's like very, very like
it's almost like Man of Steel dull.
It's real dull. But when he's brought back to, when he's reminded of something beautiful, he gets like all this color. So the scene where he sees Jim outside playing with the dog is this ultra bright, monochrome, like beautiful golden color. And then
full of life.
And then all of a sudden back to him looking out at an empty courtyard area.
Yeah.
And it's all just kind of gray and stuff. And then
it feels very cold.
Yeah. And then we see him in the bathroom.
Going to that bathroom. Oh, we should point out they're in Los Angeles, right? Or are they in some other part of Southern California?
Yeah, I think we're skipping over some stuff because it's not. So he doesn't answer the Charlie thing. There's actually another phone call before that.
There's a phone call before Charlie?
Yeah, the phone rings. Well, we assume that it's Charlie. We eventually know that it's Charlie calling on the phone. But so he gets that chest pain.
Oh yeah.
And then he sits at the table, and at the table he's thinking about he was at a time where it was like him and Jim, and they were having this like really intimate, close moment, and he's like really resistant to him. And Jim says to him, like Jim's like, we can be seen, it's fine, and that's why he's resistant to him. And Jim says to him, you're the one who always says we're invisible. And the invisible thing, I think, is also important, which is why, I'm sorry, I don't mean to waylay your...
I don't remember this happening at all, let alone in that moment there.
But they talk about the house in that moment a little bit, and the fact
the house is basically
glass.
All windows.
Well, and they refer to it as a glass house, and I think that's important. It's the house is really clearly like a Frank Lloyd Wright inspired house.
Yeah, it's basically big, huge beams of wood, and then huge windows like everywhere.
And they reference the glass house thing a couple times in the film.
Yeah,
and I think it represents a couple of things. One, George is part of a group that's discriminated against, especially in the 60s. Discriminated against still today, but especially in the 60s. And I think maybe perhaps that live in a glass house to be finally seen.
Yeah.
And also to maybe check themselves before they judge others, which is sort of that whole proverb about those who live in glass houses don't throw stones.
Shouldn't throw stones, right.
The other thing is, I think kind of going along with what you were saying about seeing Ginnifer Goodwin is it allows him to look out into the world without being a part of it. Like he's still like protected in his own home.
Yeah.
The house apparently is really, really small. And they ended up building special walls that they can move in and out, so that way they could create rooms. So like the bedroom is actually the same room as the bathroom, which is the same room as the living room in the thing. So it's like, yeah, because the house is super small apparently.
Huh.
Yeah.
I wonder if we could drive to that house.
Yeah. So the first time the phone rings, he looks at it and doesn't answer it, and that's when we get the flashback of the night Jim's cousin calls.
Right. Yes. That voice of Jim's cousin, Mr. Ackerley, played by John Hamm.
John Hamm, yeah.
Star of, what's it called there? Mad Men. And I think Mad Men had started at this point.
Yeah.
So John Hamm was in that whole early 60s mode.
Yeah, so it's basically
it's
Don
sort of
Draper
like
calling.
Don Draper, yeah, calling to say, my cousin, whom you're in love with, has died in a car accident, and the family doesn't want you anywhere near the funeral or anything like that.
Yeah, he says, I guess I need to get on the plane. He says, it's for family only.
Yeah.
And that line is like...
Ice cold is what that is.
It's so brutal.
Yeah.
That line.
Yeah.
It's so crushing. And you can see that in Colin Firth's face. In George's face, like, his eyes tell us everything we need to know about, like, George's motivations throughout the rest of the film. Like, why he's doing everything he's doing is kind of motivated by, we're not going to consider you his family.
Yeah. It's effed up. Effed
And so so after the phone call, like, while we're in that flashback, he goes to Charlie's house.
Right, he runs to Charlie's house. Is it raining? Yes.
Pouring down rain.
And he's a mess, and he's staggering over, and she answers the door, and they, do a big wet cry, scream in silence sort of thing.
And all we hear is the rain. We don't hear them at all.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like sad and beautiful all at the same time. It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And this idea that, like, you only remember certain details of events like this,
Yeah. And it establishes that Charlie lives, like, right up the block.
Right up the block, within running distance.
Super convenient.
Yeah.
Charlie is a English-born friend of his, and it sounds like they were very good friends in England and came to America together, if I'm not mistaken.
They were a couple.
They were, that's right. Oh, well, we find that out later.
But you're right. So then the bathroom happens and the phone rings again. Okay.
And this time it's Charlie. She's doing her makeup. She says something about, make sure you bring some gin for tonight. And what else does she say?
He kind of tries to get out of it a little bit.
Does he?
Yeah, I feel like he does. But I like the fact that he answers the phone with his pants around his ankles.
Yeah, well, who doesn't like, Colin Firth answering a phone with his pants around his ankles? What? Right. So yeah, we get a taste for his back and forth with Charlie and how close they are. And at first on that phone call, I almost thought Charlie might be a prostitute that he visits regularly, because I feel like she mentioned something else in the call about other appointments. I could be wrong. I could be very wrong, or no, maybe it was the way the call was worded. It almost made it seem like they have a regularly scheduled appointment, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. But it was hard to say. But
did you notice anything else interesting about how her side of the conversation was presented?
Was it in the warm, bright,
full color,
living colors that we don't see?
She's in full color.
Oh.
She's one of the things that George thinks is beautiful, and he loves her, and she's his friend, and so she's presented in full color in that scene.
Okay. Charlie is in full color, because we're not seeing her through George's eyes at that moment. This is one of the few scenes that takes place without George in it, kind of.
Yeah, I mean,
he's in it because he's on the other end of the phone.
I think the color represents how George feels about the things.
Right, right.
So he feels warmly about her, so we see her warmly.
Yeah, but it's like any other thing that we see where that happens. George is there in the room with the person and the feeling.
And this we see the transition when George is there. That's correct.
Pretty cool. Does George go to work? He goes to work at the college, or does something else happen in between? Oh, yeah, and we see that he keeps a gun in his desk.
And he puts it in his bag.
a revolver, which he puts in his briefcase to go to school where he's a teacher, a literature professor, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And then he goes, he's talking about Huxley in the school scene. But he that's when he goes and talks to the housekeeper, gives her some notes.
Yeah,
and talks about the bread.
Take the bread out of the freezer, for crying out loud.
It's too fresh. But he does something here that I think is, we don't know exactly what's going on. We have a feeling for things, but they continue to give us more hints about what's going on. And he kisses the woman on the cheek. He thanks her.
Yeah.
Says, thank you. And then he leans over and he kisses the maid on the cheek. And her facial expression is, this has never happened.
Yeah. That's true. Dear sweet.
So we know something is wrong.
Maid,
I don't remember her name.
I feel like by the time the gun is introduced, we can get a pretty good guess for what he's planning to do.
We have a feel for it. But still, they give us things. But then he drives away in slow motion. Do you remember that?
To go to school?
To go to school. To go to work.
I don't remember that being in slow motion.
He sees the kids outside, and Jennifer Goodwin outside.
Oh.
And he drives by in slow motion, and the little boy's pointing a fake gun at him, and he does the little pistol symbol with his fingers.
Yeah.
He sees the little girl in her dress and stuff, and
threatens to kill that kid.
Yeah.
He kind of does later.
He does later, but he sees this all in slow motion, almost like this is the last time I'm ever going to see these people.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody listening has watched the movie.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear George is planning to off himself.
Yeah.
Probably tonight. Certainly in the very near future.
Right.
He gets to school. He's walking along through the whole quad and everything.
So my note here
November
is
30th.
The day this movie takes place is November 30th, 1963.
Interesting.
Yeah. Sorry.
So Kennedy was assassinated by then.
Yeah.
Or was he assassinated December 22nd?
11/22/63.
It was okay. Wow.
There's a TV series coming out based on the Stephen King book that I loved. Just
which one was that?
11/22/63.
Oh, well, there you have it. There you have it.
So he pulls up to the school.
He gets to the school. He's walking through the through the quad, trying to get to his building, his classroom. We see.
Do you remember how they show him walking?
Kind of. I mean, they show him a couple different ways. It's kind of in slow-mo. There's the bit where he's walking straight down the middle of the sidewalk, and everybody else is coming in the opposite direction.
He's the only one going upstream.
Yeah.
And they only show him from the back in that moment. Everybody's saying hi to him and waving to him, but we're completely disconnected from that because we don't see his face.
Right.
We don't know how he connects to them.
We don't even see a twitch of the head or anything.
Right.
Which is very strange. But in a way, that's almost antithetical of his whole feeling invisible thing, because everybody there seems happy to see him.
Nobody sees his real self.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Who he really is, he's completely invisible.
Yeah. Well, then he spots Nicholas Holt, Kenny.
Mm-hmm.
Kenny, what is his last name? I remember him having a real fun last name. Kenny Potter. Never mind.
Potter,
that's
he
not
calls
all
him
that
Mr.
fun.
Potter at one moment, and I thought that's a very Harry Potter thing. The teacher calling him Mr. Potter.
Yeah. And he's chilling in the grass with his fuzzy sweater and this beautiful young woman who seems to always be smoking a cigarette. And so he spots them, and it's pretty clear that Kenny is indeed seeing the true side of Professor George Falconer, and they make a pretty clear connection just in that glance between each other.
Yeah.
What is it? George gets into his office again and calls Charlotte again.
Oh no, that's way later.
This is where I wrote, "Is she a hooker?"
No, that's later. So he goes to reception and talks to the receptionist there.
Oh yes,
and she says
that's where I first noticed the glowing.
Yeah.
Part.
So she says, tells him the story about how a student came in asking for his address, and he was very charming, and she gave it to him before she even realized what she was doing. And he tells her how beautiful she is, and when she's talking, he looks at her lips.
Yeah.
And that's when the color bursts.
Yeah, you see it really go from dull to just super bright, gorgeous golden and red and what have you.
And it kind of comes back a little bit.
Yeah.
And then you see her neck, and you see him kind of sniff, and it comes back again.
Oh, yeah. And
it's very, very subtle.
Picks out which perfume she's wearing.
Exactly.
Hits the nail on the head.
And he leaves her standing there shocked that he told her how beautiful she was, because I think, again, kind of like the maid, this doesn't happen.
Right.
So.
Right.
Now we have Lee Pace introduced. Do you have that in your notes?
I don't know. Lee Pace plays a which kind of professor?
As a colleague of his, I don't remember.
Okay, they didn't mention.
But he's like really, really caught up in the Cuban Missile Crisis, right?
Yeah. Which, again, was over long before Kennedy was assassinated. This is strange. This timing.
So he talks about how he's purchased a bomb shelter, and you got to get on that because you don't want other people to know your bomb shelter is better than theirs. And,
right.
And while they're talking, they pass by this tennis court, and
there are a couple of shirtless guys
hanging out with the boys.
It's playing Kenny Loggins hanging with the boys, playing with the boys. I
don't remember,
but yeah, there are some shirtless young men playing tennis. And George is definitely enjoying getting a slow motion eye full of their.
Well, we get a color burst again
of their torsos. We do get a color burst. Yeah. We see very clearly that one of those men has a pretty good outie belly button going on, and George is he's appreciating the beauty of life even as he's planning to.
That's dead on, man.
Take his own.
I think that's like a dead on account of what is going on in that scene. He's really appreciating the beauty of life.
It's making me sad though because he's still planning to kill himself, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. So then, do you have him teaching?
Yeah, he teaches his class. He's talking about Aldous Huxley. He's what's her name? Kenny's sort of girlfriend is full. It's Lois. Yes, she's fully just smoking cigarettes right there in the middle of class. Yeah. Some student asks him a question about
was Huxley an anti-Semite?
Right, was Huxley an anti-Semite? And George defends him, saying like, no, of course he wasn't. I forget the exact.
He defends argument. The Nazis. So a couple things happen. He doesn't really defend the Nazis.
No,
specify, but
doesn't the student's question not really have anything to do with the Nazis? But the kid kind of somehow makes it about the Nazis.
He's trying to turn Huxley into a villain.
Yeah,
but so on the way to the classroom, we hear George talk about how like the kids essentially look like cows. They're like bovine.
Yeah.
And that he sort of talks about the decline of intelligence in young people in the country, which obviously has continued and we still feel today.
Oh, sure.
And so he has this real negative view on youth, and he doesn't really have faith in them. And sort of the answers that he gives, he gets that daydream of being a water again. Like he asks what the students like thought about something in the book, and a kid starts to talk. He's like, well, the book is just about this dude who's rich and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And then he starts daydreaming about being pulled down under the water again. Mm-hmm. And then he sees Kenny and Lois and
smoking in the classroom.
When he locks eyes with Kenny, though, we get the color burst.
We get the color burst.
Yeah.
Because Kenny's a very handsome Nicholas Holt.
Yeah, and so then the kid asks the question about was Huxley a anti-Semite, because he talks about a passage in the Bible. And
that's what it was.
I don't exactly remember what the passage was, but basically, what he tells him is he wasn't an anti-Semite, and he talks about how like we live in an age of fear.
Yeah.
Right. Which is relevant to today. The fear of minorities, fear of dying alone, he says fear of being invisible.
Yeah.
And he addresses the Nazis, and he said, the Nazis had a fear.
Yeah.
It wasn't a real fear, but they had a fear.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how he kind of defends that whole thing.
I got to read more Aldous Huxley.
Okay.
I think. Where were we here? Am I on my second page of notes already? No, I'm not.
Yeah, because you had the phone call with Charlie, and I have that like in a scene or two.
Huh.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
I don't know.
Gosh, I don't know either. All right.
After class.
After class, is that when he gets the phone call with Charlie? Because he's cleaning out his office too.
He has a discussion with Kenny first. They walk. Remember they.
See, I thought that was after he cleaned out his office.
No, I mean nope.
Oh, but rather, is this when Kenny buys him the pencil sharpener?
So they have this walk, and they have a discussion, and it seems like Kenny's sort of the exception to the rule.
Yeah, and you can tell Kenny's basically fishing around, sort of saying like, "I'm romantically interested in you, Mr. Teacher Guy, and we can't really talk about it out loud, but
I felt like that was really, really clear. But the way I understand the way Tom Ford, the director, saw it was he didn't know that his teacher was gay.
Oh.
That there may have been some suspicion.
All right.
But he doesn't know.
And
that maybe Kenny doesn't know about himself necessarily.
Interesting.
And we'll address some of those things that would contradict that a little bit later because they come later in the film. But I think like the fact that the kid's curious is really intriguing to George.
Well, sure.
But they walk through the campus together, and I thought it was really interesting the shot that they use. They use the same hallway twice.
Oh,
so
yeah?
they walk and they like take a corner, and all of a sudden they're in the same hallway, but you don't realize it because they move the camera in closer and at a different angle.
Oh.
But if you look really closely, they're walking the same direction that they were walking before.
That's very strange.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, it's like a neat filmmaking thing. You can dual, or like, I think people underestimate what you can do with camera angles, and you can completely trick. We had no idea that they were doing that at the time. So,
I sure didn't.
Yeah, so it seems like a different building when it's really just the exact same thing.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, good move, frankly. And save yourself some time.
And he asked him about drugs. You ever take drugs?
Oh yeah.
And he talks about how he can't really get by. Kenny says he can't really get by without taking drugs, and George is resistant at first. He's like, I don't think I should be talking about this with you.
Right.
And then he's like, you know, what about mescaline? And George is like, he's like, I had a problem with mescaline once. I shaved off an eyebrow because I looked in the mirror and didn't like what I saw. So I thought I could fix it by shaving my eyebrow. I had to wear a bandage over my eyebrow for 6 weeks, which is a true story that happened to Tom Ford.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He shaved off his own eyebrow?
Yeah, on mescaline.
On a mescaline trip.
Yeah.
Huh. I've never tried mescaline.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely against the idea. I'm kidding. Kids, you stay off the drugs out there.
So Kenny tells George that he watches him in class, and we get like a really close up on Kenny's face, and the color just like rushes in.
Well, sure.
Again,
I think it's safe to say George is attracted to Kenny,
and I think that's when he buys the pencil sharpener for him, right?
Yeah, and he picks out a blue one. Kenny picks.
No, he picks out a red one, and George picks out a yellow one because George talks about what colors could mean, and he's like, well, what does this mean? And I think he says. It can mean a lot of things. It could mean passion or anger.
Yeah, that's about red.
About red. That's what Kenny chose. George picks a yellow one.
He does pick yellow.
And they don't really... You'd think it'd be blue with how sad he was, but...
Yeah,
he picks a yellow one because he shows it again later. And I didn't write this down in my initial scene for the notes. For the scene, but I wrote it down later when we see the pencil sharpener again that it was yellow. And Kenny's kind of surprised. He's like, you walked all this way just to talk to me. And George is like, yeah, why not? And then that's when he goes to his office to clean out his desk.
That's when he cleans out his desk. And we see that he's got the gun with him still.
He does have the gun.
Which is not great. And I thought, let me see.
So this is where he calls Charlie.
Okay. Wow. So I did a big old skip in my notes there.
Yeah, that first scene, I think where you had this down, when he's in the office, he's waiting for 10:30, right? So like he's sitting on the edge of his desk and he's looking at the clock, and the moment it hits 10:30, he grabs his bag and goes. It's like he's so meticulous and so specific about everything in his life.
Yeah.
That he like doesn't go to class until he needs to, like it's time to go to class.
Weird.
Yeah.
But that's how I treat class, too. So he calls Charlie again.
Yep.
I'm still confused about whether or not she's a hooker myself. He's got the gun in his briefcase. And let's see. He's cleaning out his office. And then... Doesn't Kenny catch him then on his way to his car to leave for the day?
Yeah, so he asks her he asks Charlie if he should bring something, and she says vodka.
Gin.
Tanqueray
gin, because she likes the bottle.
Gin. And he's like, you like the gin.
Yeah. Who doesn't?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, gin's pretty gnarly.
Sort of suggesting, one, their playful nature, but also she drinks too much.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah,
and then,
Charlotte.
And then he goes to the car and starts to pull the gun out of his bag.
He does.
And that's when Kenny shows up.
Kenny shows up, interrupts him taking the gun out of his bag, and asks him about why he was cleaning out his office. And then asks him if he'd like to meet for a drink sometime.
Yeah.
Which is good because, Kenny doesn't even realize it, but he's kind of in the process of maybe giving George something to live for.
Yeah. Well, and George asks him why Kenny wants to go for a drink, and he says, because I think you might need a friend.
Yeah.
And it was like such a touching moment in the film, I thought. And George, the color flushes in that moment, and George says, "You may be right."
Mm-hmm. He does need a friend.
And then he leaves and goes to the bank.
Goes to the bank. He cleans out his safety deposit box.
Mm-hmm.
Finds is that where he finds the nude picture of Jim, which he kept in a safety deposit box?
Yeah, because I think in that age you could never have that at home, something like that. I think you would keep that secreted away somewhere.
Maybe that's it. Jim is nude, out on a rock,
and we get
smiling from ear to ear,
and we get the flashback at that scene.
Oh yes, where they have the conversation. Now that conversation, they're
sunning themselves.
There are quite a few flashbacks in this movie, but this one, is this the only one that's in black and white?
It's in black and white, and I think there's a really good reason behind that.
Let's hear it.
So we know a couple things about the scene. We know that it's probably the moment that he takes the black and white photo. So we know he's taking black and white photos, as well as there's a camera sitting next to him when they're sunning themselves on the rocks.
Okay.
So I think because he's shooting this in black and white, he remembers the scene as black and white.
Oh.
Like the only physical proof that he has that this happened is in black and white.
That's true. And then this scene takes place pretty soon before Jim's fatal car crash, doesn't it? Doesn't Jim mention in this conversation that when he goes to Colorado, he's going to want to take the dogs because his mom likes them so much?
That's in a scene later when they're reading.
That's in the reading scene. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, spoiler for the reading scene then, ladies and gentlemen. So Jim has this flashback of George has a flashback of he and Jim on the rocks, and then he leaves the safety deposit box room with everything from his box.
Yep.
But then he stays in the bank.
He goes to withdraw money.
That's what it is.
And he forgot his checkbook.
And he's looking through his briefcase, and the gun is plainly visible. Now, I was like, whoa.
Is he going to take the gun out and blow everyone away?
No, I was thinking somebody else is going to see that he's got a gun and freak out, and this movie was about to take a big old turn.
I actually thought the bank teller was maybe going to see that too, because she's a little flirtatious with him in both those moments, both the safe deposit box and I forgot my checkbook scene, and I kind of thought maybe she was gonna follow him over because has no idea.
I feel like when he's like, oh, I seem to have forgotten my checkbook, and turns to walk away, I feel like she gives him a really mean look as he's going.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if maybe that's her just being like, I know this dude's a gay dude, and I don't like that.
Feels a little contrary to sort of how she treated him in the safe deposit box room to me, but
why wouldn't there be a contradiction?
She could be giving him sort of. I thought it was like a stun.
Giving him a stink eye.
I thought it was maybe a little more of a stun look, but maybe it could be because she was hoping to spend more time with him, and he turned around and walked away.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
So, I don't know. Could be either way.
The teller gives him the stink eye. We know that much. He's sitting down in the bank lobby, looking through his briefcase. We can plainly see the gun, and a little pair of shoes step up in front of him, and it's the neighbor girl from across the street.
And I absolutely love the shot. Anytime there's really beautiful reflective shots, I'm a big fan.
Yeah,
I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff.
A beautiful reflective shot.
She's wearing a little blue dress, and she looks really pretty, and
she's carrying a scorpion in a jar,
and she's in full color.
Full color, yes.
She gets the color treatment, which is kind of a cool Wizard of Oz thing. So she walks up, and you see her feet there, and then she taps her feet, and the color shows up. And
that's true.
Like a Wizard of Oz thing.
Yeah, little Dorothy Gale kind of thing. Yeah. But why on earth would any little girl walk around with a scorpion in a jar?
There's an interesting story behind that.
Tell me that story.
So, let's talk about what she says about the scorpion in the jar.
I'm afraid to.
Okay, so she says, "Would you like to meet Charlton Heston?" That's the
first thing she says.
Charlton's a scorpion. They drop bugs into it, and they watch the scorpion fight and kill and eat the bugs.
Yeah.
And so they talk about how it's like the Colosseum. So her brother Tom put little columns around the jar. So this scene is a story out of director Tom Ford's life. Remember, she says she has a brother named Tom.
Right.
And in the scene, she talks about what her father thinks of George.
Right.
And she says that her father says George is light in his loafers. Which
is
obviously a derogatory term for gay people.
Right.
But she doesn't know.
She doesn't know what that means.
And she says, I don't know if that's true because I never see you're not wearing loafers. And then she says, I think Tom may be a little light in his loafers. And I read that Tom, this is true. The girl is his sister.
Wow.
In real life, the girl's playing his sister. And they did have a scorpion in a little jar, a little Charlton Heston scorpion.
And she would carry it around to the bank?
Well, I don't know about that part, but he said, quote, her brother Tom was indeed light in his loafers. Tom Ford is gay. A lot of the stories in the so there's most of this is from the book, but there are pieces of his real life of Tom Ford's life put into this as well.
And then I have Jennifer Goodwin with a big exclamation point because she shows up to hustle the girl away, and I think she invites George to come over that night.
It's a cocktail party.
To a cocktail party, but George has other plans.
Yep. Plans
that involve a 6-shooter.
And Charlie.
And Charlie, but then eventually, ultimately, a 6-shooter. Does George leave the bank and go to the liquor store, or is there something in between?
There's something in between. But when the girl gets walked away, the color fades.
It does.
Yeah, it's very sad. And he has a look on his face that's a little like...
He misses the scorpion that she carries around in the bank.
George goes and buys ammo for his gun.
Oh, that's right.
And I remember the kid behind the counter being super young and thinking...
Yeah, he looks like he's 15.
I kept thinking, man, America's great, right? Just this rows and rows of guns and this young kid selling ammo. But then he pulls his car up in front of a billboard. But we see, all we see at first are just eyes.
Yeah, right? Just this big set of eyes that belong to a face.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, that looks like Janet Leigh?
Yeah.
And he goes into the liquor store, and he spots this handsome young greaser, who we come to learn is named Carlos, because as George comes out of the liquor store with his gang of Tanqueray, he smashes the door into Carlos. The Tanqueray smashes. Carlos's cigarettes fall out and get wet by all the Tanqueray. And George insists on going back in, buying Carlos a fresh pack.
He also buys him... Does he buy him liquor, too?
Well,
he comes back out with two bottles.
I think he just replaces the bottles that just got smashed.
Oh, is there 2 bottles that got smashed?
I think there was only one.
But he comes out with 2.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's weird.
But even Carlos is like, oh, no, you don't have to get me a new pack. And he's like, of course, I insist, blah, blah, blah. So they have a cigarette while standing about 9 inches from each other.
Yeah.
And smoking in each other's faces.
Can I address
of course.
The billboard real fast? Because it actually applies to this, what you're talking about here.
All right.
Eyes are obviously really important in this.
Sure, especially George feels invisible.
And because when he actually connects with someone and connects with their eyes, we get that sort of flush of color. But we also know something else. So the movie Psycho is very much about fear.
Yeah.
And we get this image of eyes, and we know that fear is on George's mind because he just had this conversation with the kids in his class. He also sees the dog before he goes into the liquor store. There's a woman has a dog in a car, and she...
Oh, yes.
They have this conversation. It looks a lot like his dog's.
Yeah.
And he leans in and he kisses the dog, and when he kisses the dog, the color floods back in. But then he runs into Carlos, and and then they stand very close, like you say, and have a chat and a smoke. But when he locks eyes with Carlos, when they're doing that, when they're having that, I can't remember if it's before they go in to the place.
Yeah, I think.
But he locks eyes with them, and the color comes in.
Yeah, I think as soon as he sees Carlos at all, the color really comes in, because Carlos is a handsome devil,
another beautiful man, right?
And Carlos, while they're talking, Carlos talks about how he's from Madrid. And he came to America because, some American traveling in Madrid was like, oh, come to America and I can make you a star and this and that and the other thing. And then he kind of hints that, maybe George might want to take him for a ride somewhere. And, he's open to that
George
sort
gives
of
him
thing.
Money.
He does, doesn't
George
he?
puts a $20 bill in his hand.
Yeah.
To help him out. because he's this guy who came from Madrid, and he doesn't, he like came here to become an actor, and that hasn't worked out for him.
Well, but I mean,
because his accent is too thick.
And don't they also establish that he like just got to America though, right? Like it's.
Yeah, he said they flew me here. They flew me here, but then they heard me speak and they thought my accent was too thick.
Yeah, but I feel like somewhere it's mentioned that he's really only been there for like a month or two. Yeah, like maybe. It's real. He's really new to town.
Yeah.
So yeah, George gives him some money, and Carlos is like, "Oh, don't you want to like take me somewhere now, dude?" Which
he like tries to get in George's car.
Yeah.
George is like, "No,
that's okay. That's okay, Carlos." George heads back to his house.
Well, they actually smoke another cigarette.
They do.
They notice the sunset and how beautiful it is, and we get a really colorful thing again, right?
Yeah.
And Carlos says it's from the smog. It's so pretty because of the smog. And then they go back around to the back of the car and they lean against the car and have another cigarette and they talk a little bit more. And he says essentially he says something beautiful from something terrible.
Yeah.
Which is like another like sign to George, I think, that like, hey man, all hope is not lost. You can still have something beautiful from something terrible.
Right. Take it from me, standing in front of this psycho billboard.
Yeah. You
can have something beautiful from something terrible. I don't know. I almost want George to have said, "You know what, Carlos? Let's drive off into the sunset together."
You know,
but he didn't.
Even if you had just taken him home, like the course of events would have been very different. You know,
yeah.
Who knows what would have happened in the film?
Who indeed? But George goes home alone in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And we see him start laying out basically all of his personal documents to sort of, he lays out a bunch of keys that are all labeled. We see his suit hanging with a note on it. And then he even starts sort of testing positions on his bed.
Well, we actually have a flashback before this.
Oh, do we?
We do.
Which flashback?
So he gets home and
so many flashbacks I've lost track of.
So he gets home and the neighbors are having their cocktail party and it's real noisy outside.
Yeah.
And so he puts on a record. He goes to put on a record on, and they get the flashback of the two men reading.
This is where the reading flashback happens. Okay.
So,
George and Jim are curled up on a couch, sort of at opposite ends, listening to music, reading. The record stops. George is like, "Oh, you have to go change it because you're the younger one and you're fast on your feet," and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that's where they discuss that Jim wants to take the dogs with him when he makes his road trip to Colorado to see his parents, which will ultimately be the last time they see each other.
So, and George is reading Metamorphosis
by Kafka.
Yeah, and Jim is reading Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Right.
Capote.
Truman Capote.
And the scene is kind of... I really like the scene because they make a point of showing specific things.
Yeah.
They show the dog laying on the ground. This is where the other... the dog cast came in because the real dog wouldn't sit still.
Aww.
So they have one dog on their laps and they have one dog on the ground. They sort of have these conversations about, good work and bad work and music and, age. You get up, I'm old.
Right.
You're young and spry. And the dogs and stuff. And they sort of show the normalcy of their lives, just how kind of almost mundane their lives are.
Yeah, they're just a couple being a couple.
They kind of gripe at each other a little bit, but they also are kind of playful with each other.
Right.
And there's a statement on like lifestyle, right? So, gay people have been told for a long time that, oh, that's your lifestyle.
Right.
And for them, it's just normalcy. It's just life, not lifestyle. And that comes up again in the scene with Charlie, sort of. But I guess we'll address that in a minute. But then he lays out the stuff. Do you remember what he writes on the note for the suit?
For the suit, no.
Tie in a Windsor knot.
Oh.
Like he's so meticulous and so specific about how he wants everything to go that like even the suit that they are going to bury him in, he wants it to be just right.
That makes sense. That's so George.
But then he starts getting in those positions like you were saying.
Yeah, he starts laying on the bed with the gun in his hand and practicing, like, I guess how best to shoot himself through the mouth without fully ruining the bed. Because then at one point he even brings over a sleeping bag
Yeah.
And gets into that
He
and starts trying to do it with himself fully wrapped up in the sleeping bag.
And he sits up in the bed with a pillow behind himself. He goes into the shower.
Right.
And then he kind of slips and falls. Then he gets the sleeping bag out, and it's like...
Yeah, it seems like he's just trying to figure out the least messy way to do it so that whoever has to clean it up won't be too what's the word?
Hard on the maid.
Yeah, it won't be too hard on the maid. And then he leaves a note in an envelope for his maid with a bunch of cash in it, tucked into the frozen bread bag, puts it back in the freezer for her.
Yeah.
I guess he's assuming that hopefully she'll find that before she finds his dead body, because I think she's pretty much guaranteed to be the one who finds him.
Well, and
Heaven help us.
He leaves a bunch of notes that are sealed. He leaves one we see specifically is to Charlie. We don't know who the other ones are to. This suicide is actually the scene is based on a cousin of Tom Ford's.
Oh my gosh, really?
Who did kill himself, and he laid everything out with instructions and then wrapped himself in a sleeping bag.
Whoa!
Oh, somebody else didn't turn their phone on silent. I'm not the only one today.
Well, that alarm going off means it's to remind me to do something at 3:00, and it's 3:00.
Wow, let's wrap this up.
Yeah,
let's get it done.
All right, so he's laid all this stuff out. He takes the bottle of Tanqueray. He goes to Charlie. He walks past Ginnifer Goodwin's family having their cocktail party and sort of does a bit of a way. Oh no, the fantasy sequence.
The little boy shoots the gun, but what does he imagine doing to the little boy?
Oh, right, yeah. So
he imagines pissing all over the kid.
Well, I was about to get to that, yes. So yeah, he's walking, and one of the little neighbor kids pops out of the bushes with a machine gun and shoots it at him. And does he say it? Yeah, he imagines just whizzing all over this kid's face. Because do you
remember why?
Yeah, somebody mentions... Jim says that one of their dogs peed all over the kid, right? Yeah, that's what it was.
He felt like simultaneously like... I don't know if he said exactly shame and pride or something, but that was the sentiment that like he was like, horrified.
Yeah,
like
he's
pretending pretending to be embarrassed, but really happy that the dog did it because they don't really like the kid.
Because that kid, is a little jerk. So yeah, he envisions this stream of water just blasting the kid in the face, and the kid's like, ah, no. And then it cuts back to, fortunately, he did not actually do that. Yeah. And he says something like, would you like it if I... killed you right now with a gun? You're always running around shooting everything.
The kid says no.
Yeah.
Or I don't know.
I don't know. Is that what he says?
He says, I don't know. And then George says, do this again and we might find out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Ooh,
or keep doing this to people and you might find out.
We might find out. But George has every intention of just going home later that night and killing himself. So he heads to Charlie's. Mm-hmm. They have a few drinks, I'm guessing.
Well, he sees her roses outside.
Roses.
And the rose like blooms into color.
Right.
And we get like a split-second flashback of the rainy night when he's on her porch crying.
Oh.
And then she
after Jim's death.
And then she opens the door and lets him in.
Poor George.
Yeah.
They have a big old talk, and at one point in this, they go on about their relationship in Britain, coming to America, this, that, and the other thing. At one point, they get into an argument about, what is it? She calls... Well, that's what it is.
She starts to compare their failed relationships, right? And how difficult it is to be alone. And
they slow dance to stormy weather. And she says something about how Jim is a substitute for like a real relationship. I think what she's saying is for like a real relationship with a woman.
Well, and she's saying with her, really.
Yeah.
She's really getting to.
Yeah.
Yeah, they after their...
But it's like she's suggesting that only a relationship with a woman could be real, and obviously a relationship with her would be the most real as far as she's concerned.
Yeah, no,
but
you're right.
To refer to Jim as a substitute is a pretty big kick in the nuts.
Yeah, and
because he was clearly in love with Jim.
And George has this like, so he stands up and yells at her in this tirade about how, your husband left you after 9 years.
Yeah.
I was with Jim for 16 years.
Right.
And he's like, what could be more real? What could be more substantial than 16 years together?
Right. Yeah. But that argument, during that argument, I wrote the note, look at us act.
Yeah.
Because that argument just Not to say that it was necessarily bad, but I just got a feeling during that of like, oh, I'm not watching George and Charlie anymore. I'm watching Firth and Moore.
Because you felt it was staged.
Doing their lines. Yeah, and it bummed me out a little.
I thought about that. I don't know if this will make you feel any better. I think this is an argument they've had a million times.
Oh.
I think they're going through the motions because if you think about how quickly they get over it,
yeah,
I think this is something that they maybe not all the specifics of like,
okay,
was he just a substitute? But like he talks about how she lives for drama, like you live for feeling sorry for yourself, and she, you relish it, and she's like, I don't. I think that they've had this type of argument over and over and over again throughout their friendship, and it doesn't really matter at the end of the day because they love each other.
Yeah.
And like they're having this argument and she's crying, and then he makes this comment about maybe you should get some donuts because it's a reference to something they talked about earlier, which she laughs at, and they just sit there and it's done. It's over. And they're friends again. It's not like this was a friendship ending moment.
Right.
So
that's good. Well, now that does put a new spin on it for me. I like that. George goes home, continues his suicide prep.
Well, what does she try to do when he leaves?
Probably kiss him on the mouth.
He kisses her, and she struggles to hold him on her face.
Yeah.
And he's like, no.
She just wants to just bring him over to the straight side, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it walks like a duck, Charlotte, that's all I can tell you. He goes home, he continues with the suicide prep, and then does he get a call from Holt, or does he just decide to go out from Kenny? How is it that he winds up meeting Kenny?
He goes home to finish the preparations, and he puts the gun to his head, and he can't really pull the trigger, and he remembers meeting Jim. He has a flashback to
meeting Jim at that bar where Jim's in his Navy uniform, and
and I think that like he remembers it's like sort of like a life moment flashing before your eyes.
Yeah,
and because of that, he like decides he can't do it without a drink. But we should talk about the Navy bar, the bar on the beach.
Okay.
And that scene when he meets Jim. Jim's there in sailor uniform.
Right.
He's a Navy man, I believe.
He looks like Maverick in the.
He could be Navy. He could be probably not Air Force.
Probably not. Probably
he's wearing
Navy.
White. So,
yeah. But I'm saying, the bar scene from Top Gun when they sing "You've Lost That Love and Feeling." He was wearing that exact same kind of outfit.
And that bar is like super packed.
Right.
And George is outside smoking, and at first Jim goes in, and then he comes back out, and that's when they George sees him go in, but that's when they really lock eyes for the first time, and it's almost like a love at first sight. Jim comes over, and they have a conversation, and he's like, "Do you live near here?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "I'm thinking about moving here after discharge," and all this stuff. And then it starts to rain,
right?
And they go into the bar, and as they're like trying to make their way through a crowd, this beautiful bombshell grabs Jim, and she's like, "Buy me a drink."
Yeah.
And he looks at George past this woman and says, "I think I'm taken."
Oh, I forgot about that moment.
And that was it. That's
whoa.
That was Jim and George. Like,
that was their meet cute.
Oh. And then we get back, and George puts the gun down and runs out. He literally runs out of the house.
Yeah, and he goes to that same bar, right?
Yeah, did you see what was outside the house?
No.
So he runs out of the house, and he stops in the driveway for a second, and then he continues to run down the street. But when he comes out of the house, there is it's not lit, so you have to look for it. There is a motorcycle sitting in front of his house.
Oh.
We know somebody who rides a motorcycle.
Is it Kenny Potter?
It would be Kenny Potter.
Uh-oh. Okay. So Kenny has parked his bike near George's house.
Which makes me wonder if Kenny saw him with the gun to his head.
Oh, maybe.
Because we know that the house is a glass house, and in theory, people could see him.
Yeah, maybe if Kenny was sneaking around on the property.
Exactly. You do hear a branch crunch as well as George runs off, but you're not really totally sure, I think, if it's somebody there or if it's George running. But
yeah.
So he goes to the bar.
He goes to the bar, and he winds up bumping into Kenny there.
Yeah,
or do they go to a second location?
No, because the bar's like practically empty.
Yeah, it's dead, and
same bartender, but he's old now. He's like 20 years later. So
and Kenny shows up, and they start talking.
Yep.
George talks about how he's like fairly wild and spontaneous. Well, something like that, because then Kenny's like, well, let's go swimming, and George is just like, yeah, sure, okay.
So they have this like kind of well, Kenny talks about being utterly alone.
Yeah.
Which is I think our first sign that Kenny is George.
Yeah.
At a younger age. Then they sort of have a philosophical discussion about appearances and perception.
Mm-hmm.
And George, says, I'm exactly as I appear if you look closely. And he says, one of, I'm trying to remember exactly, just in this philosophical conversation, I'm not exactly sure how this came up, but he says, one of the things that has made this whole thing worthwhile is when I've been able to really connect with another human being.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's another sign. Like, if you haven't picked up yet exactly what's supposed to happen, he's more so that, like, not for the audience, but it's almost like he's telling someone else what he's about to do.
Yeah.
Because he says one of the things that has made this whole thing worthwhile. Like, he knows his life is at an end.
Yeah.
And he's kind of telling this kid that his life is over. And then Kenny talks about, like, well, it's weird because, to hear you talking about life, because they tell you, when you're a kid, that when you become an adult, all these things are going to open up for you, and it all just feels like, like BS and stuff. And is that really, is it all BS? And he says, no, not all of it. And he says, I feel like as I've gotten older, I just get sillier and sillier.
Yeah.
And then
that's what it is, sillier.
Yeah. And then Kenny goes, let's go swimming. And George goes, okay.
Yeah. And Kenny says, like, oh, see, yeah, you are actually silly because anybody else. Yeah, that was a test. So they go and they run down to the beach. They get naked. They hop into the Pacific Ocean, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. And they're swimming around. And I think we see a little bit of the flash of George's daydream of kind of drowning, if I'm not mistaken. And then he gets tossed. We don't see that? I thought maybe we're just seeing him actually swimming for once.
Yeah, we see the wave come up over him.
Yeah, he gets a little tossed around, and Kenny grabs him and drags him back onto the shore, naked as a jaybird, the two of them.
Yeah.
And they decide they need to go back to George's house to get warmed up and dried off and what have you.
When Kenny notes, your head is bleeding.
Oh, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
His head is indeed bleeding, sort of close to the eyebrow that he once shaved off.
Sure.
Because they make a joke about that. They get back to George's house. Mm-hmm. Kenny keeps calling him Sir, and at one point...
it drives me nuts, actually, that he does that. But
he keeps calling him Sir? Yeah. Well, see, I think he's establishing a bit of a sub-dominant relationship here. Because then, after putting the Band-Aid on, he asks, like, is there something else I can blah, blah, blah? And George is like, well, I think first you need to get out of those wet clothes. And Kenny says, like, is that an order, sir? Well, and so I think I think Kenny is into being submissive to George.
Well, actually, the order is actually when he tells him to go get a beer.
Oh, is that when that happens?
A little bit later. But there's something that is, I think, a little submissive in that scene that you're talking about, though.
Yeah.
And so Kenny goes to the bathroom to get the peroxide
or
iodine or something.
And he finds the black and white photo of naked Jim.
And that's when he knows.
Yeah,
for sure. About his teacher. And then he goes in and they have this like really close moment. Their faces are very close to each other, and he bandages his head. And it's like kind of intimate. And he's like, you should get those wet clothes off. So Kenny goes to take a shower. Kenny knows that George is hurting at this point.
Yeah, that's clear.
And in the classroom, he talked about the fear of being invisible. And I think now that he knows that George is gay, he understands that fear is George's fear, right?
Sure.
So I think he literally bears himself in the hopes of helping George, and he makes himself seen fighting the idea that gay men are invisible.
All right.
So I think like, that is kind of a submissive thing to just like, he just drops his trousers and turns around and he's naked in front of George.
Yeah.
And then he goes and showers.
He does indeed. Then he gets out of the shower. That's when we get the beer request. Is that an order, sir?
Yeah, they go.
And
George like lights the fire, and he puts music on. And they talk about Lois.
Lois. Lois.
And Kenny and Lois did sleep together. He keeps asking about Lois, and he's like, "Well, I feel like you really mean to ask me if we slept together." And I think when he says yes, we learn that Kenny is a young George and Lois is a young Charlie.
Ooh, good point.
Yeah.
How did I not see? Well, you watched it twice.
I did watch it twice.
Oh, Lois. They fall asleep separately in George's house. George suddenly wakes up in his bed alone.
There's one thing that happens before that.
Do they French?
No, George asks Kenny why he got his address and tracked him down. And Kenny says he wanted to see him somewhere other than school. But that he also was worried about him. And George says, "What's there to worry about? I'm fine." But there's this look in his eyes that's like, I'm absolutely not fine. And I think it like shows kind of Colin Firth's range as an actor. Just he can do, especially in this film, like when he gets the phone call that Jim's dead.
Yeah,
that's a long scene of just his face.
Yeah,
he does a lot, and I think he's starting to realize something about Kenny, and as that realization hits him, after he's had his second beer, Kenny becomes blurry and he passes out.
Right.
And then he wakes up in his bed. Oh, well, he has the dream. The dream is back, and it's actually a really important version of the dream.
The drowning dream?
The drowning dream comes back, and instead of sinking,
right,
he goes to the top and he surfaces.
Yes.
Like the moment he takes air, he wakes up.
Yeah, he's alone in his bed. He discovers Kenny is sleeping alone on the couch, holding the gun.
Yeah, he goes to tuck Kenny in a little bit more and sees the gun and takes it from him. But
right.
But I think he, kind of going along with what I was just saying, like he realizes Kenny's there to save him.
Right. Kenny clearly had to have dragged George to bed and then gone snooping around the house a little bit to find that gun.
And he stayed.
He
stayed to protect George, I think.
Yeah.
And George at that point knows that he's loved, not necessarily in the deep way that Jim loved him, but he's loved, and now he knows it.
Right. And somebody has seen who he really is.
Yeah. And so he locks up the gun, opens the window. Do you remember what we see out the window?
Probably the neighbor's house.
An owl.
An owl?
He sees an owl, and the owl flies off.
I don't remember that at all.
Yeah.
An owl.
You gotta watch for it, man. Owl's there, which is important because especially in film, it's a important symbol. But I'll get to that in a second.
Get to it now. This is when the owl happens.
Yeah, so the owl happens, and I'll get there. It's right at the end of this paragraph of notes I have here. He looks at the moon, and he gets this smile on his face, like he starts to realize the good things in his life.
Right.
We get a quick flash of him dancing with Charlie.
Oh yeah.
During the Booker T and the MGs, and then he goes and takes the notes that he wrote for Charlie and the others, and he burns them. That might be where he remembers the dancing. And then he says in narration as he sits down back on his bed. Do you remember what he says? Do you have that note?
I don't.
He says that
owls are cool.
He realizes that life is exactly the way it's meant to be.
Ah.
And he reaches up to turn off the light, and he feels a twinge in his arm.
Oh no.
And
in his right arm.
In his right arm.
Which was strange.
Yeah, I always thought it was the left arm too.
It's supposed to be pretty much widely agreed upon that it's the left.
Yeah, well.
But he gets a weird twinge in his right arm.
The lamp is on that side of the bed. Maybe it's just maybe they just cheated it for.
Maybe they shot it and then reversed the footage.
Yeah.
I don't know. We may never know.
And so he falls down having the heart attack. And you hear the clock ticking, and then the clock just suddenly stops. Now, an owl, especially in film, probably in other forms of media as well, owls usually represent death.
Oh.
So it's like the owl is there, and the owl flies off the tree branch.
Yikes.
Yeah. And then one of the moments I really liked about the film, just like the ink spot at the beginning of the movie, Jim is there as he's laying there in the bedroom.
Oh, that's right.
And
Jim walks in.
And he kisses him right in the same spot that the ink spot was on his lip. And George dies thinking of Jim.
Oh.
So the movie began with him lying in their bedroom thinking about Jim, and he dies thinking about Jim. And that's that's the movie, man.
Well, it's also him dreaming that he had been able to kiss Jim goodbye one last time.
Jim kissed him,
and now here he is dreaming that Jim has come to kiss him.
Well, again,
almost kiss him hello, really.
Yeah, well, and well, to like make sure he gets seen off to the other side, kind of thing.
Yeah,
like kind of like we talked about, the black spot on his lip is the kiss of death, and Jim comes as he's dying and kisses him when he dies. So Jim's kiss is the kiss of death. I liked this movie even more the second time. I think it's really beautiful, and I think it's creative. I think it has its problems.
Every movie does.
I like that there wasn't any replacing Jim. You know, they have that conversation about Jim was a substitute. And,
right.
Like, he's a substitute for real love or whatever. And this kid kind of comes along and reminds George that, like, not everything is terrible. And there are connections that you can still make, because George talks about making connections.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the kid can't be a substitute for Jim.
Right. But he could be something completely new.
Well, he can't, because Jim dies, right? Like,
well, George dies.
George dies.
But had he not died, perhaps he and Kenny.
But I guess what I'm saying is, like, that's the way. Like, George says it at the end of the movie. Things are the way they're supposed to be.
Yeah, that's also
this
true.
This kid was never going to be a part of George's life, other than this one night, and that's what I kind of love about it, is that, like, this kid, like, you're right, like, in some fantasy, this kid could replace Jim, but he can't, because that's not what happens in the film. He like, the movie holds true to this idea that he argues with Charlie that Jim was not a substitute,
right? And
so just like Jim wasn't a substitute, this kid's not a substitute either. And that, like, this love is real and it's permanent, and it's it's evident because George dies at the end of the film.
No, spoiler alert! If you haven't watched A Single Man, why'd you listen to this? But also, thanks for listening.
Real quick about the pencil sharpener. When Kenny buys that, later in the bar, he takes the pencil sharpener out and shows it to Kenny, little yellow pencil sharpener. He's like,
"Oh, right."
He's like, "Oh, you kept it," and he says something. He says, "One must always appreciate life's little gifts." And I think the overall point of the film is that, and they beat us kind of over the head with it, is that the important things in life are the things that we usually overlook.
Yeah.
And we kind of keep going because of friendship and love and the things that connects us to them. So I think that's one of the reasons why I ended up really liking this film a lot, is because I think that's a beautiful message to have. So it's a sad, kind of a downer of a film, but it has, like, this really beautiful message in it. So
yeah,
I'm gonna move the micro.
It's a very sad movie.
Yeah. So I mean, did you like it?
I mean, yes. I'm not, like, crazy about it.
Did you like it? Did you like it more than American in Paris?
That's a great question. Not entirely sure if I have an answer for it right now. Did I like it? Nah, I don't know. I mean, both movies, it's sort of like I've seen them each once. I'm not really in a hurry to see either one again. That sort of a thing, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, there it is. That was fine.
Well,
what's next?
You want to draw some movies?
Let's find out what's next. Yeah.
Maybe to be Jodorowsky's Dune. You know the
every time you say it, it's not. So
the producers of Jodorowsky's Dune follow us on Twitter.
I know, isn't that awesome?
Yeah, it's pretty great,
guys. If you're listening,
thank you.
Your movie is. Thank you for following, and your movie is in this here bucket, and we aim to watch it just as soon as we randomly draw it.
Now I'm coming around to seeing it. Now that they're following us on Twitter.
Also, it's great. Why can't you just take my word for the fact that it's great?
I believe you that you say it's great. I it's not a subject that would be something that I would normally watch. Is all I'm saying. You got something there. Is it Jodorowsky's Dune?
No.
What you got?
Sullivan's Travels.
Good movie. Okay, Sullivan's Travels.
All right.
And
I ripped a piece off of it.
And I drew Mutiny on the Bounty.
Oh.
So we will see what these two movies have in common, because no doubt with the fate of the bucket, they have some type of connection.
Wowzers! All right.
Or there's going to be some sort of piracy escapade over the next week in the news.
Oh boy! Let's hope not. Sullivan's Travels and Mutiny on the Bounty.
Sullivan's Travels is really cool.
Yeah, I know.
It's about an actor.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's about a director.
Yeah, I almost think I saw it, or maybe
you told me you
almost
seen it.
Watched it. I'm pretty sure I have not, but I know that it's one of those movies that I know I should see.
It's in the bucket because you're supposed to watch it. So that's the movie, the episode for this 2 weeks.
Yeah, thank you for listening. And now get ready and watch Sullivan's Travels and Mutiny on the Bounty.
I just want to say thank you again to Dwayne, who does our intros this week. We asked him to kind of, I discussed it with him, and we both agreed that this week would be a more laid back episode announcement in light of the events in Paris. So thank you to Dwayne.
Thanks,
for
Dwayne.
Once again helping us out. Thank you to Acid Ink Selections for your recommendation on wine.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you to the Viewsters. Love you guys. Also, thank you to Katie, who we've talked about one other time. She gave me some pretty nifty suggestions for some things we should do via social media that we kind of have implemented.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, so you guys are all great. I feel very loved, and thank you to Steve for taking this journey with me.
I'm having a fun time.
Have a great 2 weeks, everyone. Bon cinema.